Finance Committee meeting for April 20th, 21 will come to order. This meeting is being held in accordance with Governor Charlie Baker's signed open meeting law, order dated March 12, 2020, which relieves a public body from the requirement of Section 20 of Chapter 30A that it conduct its meetings in public places that are open and physically accessible to the public, provided that the public body makes provision to ensure public access to the deliberations of the public body for interested members of the public through adequate alternative means. That's a long-winded way of saying, folks, it's on Brockton Community Access and on the Brockton Channel YouTube Live. The Finance Committee members, staff, and certain invited guests with matters on the agenda will attend the meeting in person in council chambers out of respect for public health and in response to the governor's declared state of emergency. This meeting will be closed to the public, and interested parties can instead access the deliberations via a live stream. A couple of preliminary announcements. Councillor Azak is sick this evening. She texted me. She will not be able to join us. Legislative Council is having her COVID vaccination this evening, and Councillor Monahan is en route. So with that, Madam Clerk, would you proceed to item number 1?
Appointment of Jacqueline Murphy of 138 Torrey Street, Brockton, Massachusetts, to the Diversity Commission for a 3-year term ending April 2024. Invited, Jacqueline Murphy.
Councilors, Ms. Murphy is at home as a precaution, a health precaution, and so this matter should be postponed until the next FinCom meeting.
Motion to postpone.
Second.
Been a motion made and properly seconded to postpone. All those in favor? All those opposed? Matter postponed. Item number 2.
Appointment of Timothy J. Cruz to the position of Assistant City Clerk for the City of Brockton. Invited, Timothy J. Cruz. City Clerk Anthony J. Zioli.
Good evening, Mr.
Cruz,
President,
good evening.
Mr. Chairman, and members. You look much better from this side than when I'm looking at you from over there. Looking forward to asking you for your votes tonight for this appointment. I think it's a natural progression, and I do think that my combination of business background, customer service background, but mostly my 15 years on the council and my 10 years on the Housing Authority Board of Commissioners uniquely give me the ability to do this job. So at that, I'll entertain any questions.
Councilor Cardoza.
Good evening, Mr. Cruz.
Good evening, Councilor.
So I don't have really questions but concerns. I appreciate your time on the council and all that you've done to serve the city, and I also appreciate that you're wanting to serve the city in this capacity. But I'm concerned that we had this position opened and we never filled it. And, you know, we didn't open it up to other candidates to come before us today. I don't want to have this appearance that we're doing any wrongdoing on this council.
Neither do I.
Right. So I'm really concerned. We knew that we had a clerk that was aging and could at some point retire, and I'm concerned that we didn't fill this position in the past and that we did not open it up to other applicants. So I've given it a lot of thought, and I'm just not comfortable with the appointment today, but I'll let you speak to that if you'd like to.
Well, currently, of course, we have the process the way it's set up, and the fact that it hasn't been filled is not something I can speak to, but it is something that we need to, at this point, we have 4 people leaving soon, and a clerk will be leaving soon, and we need to fill this position. I do look forward, if I'm in this position, to working closely with the new ad hoc committee to take a look at, you know, we've only had 2 city clerks in the last 50 years, basically. And I do think it's a good time to look at the process and see if there should be changes or shouldn't be. You know, I'm not saying there is or should or shouldn't be yet, but I understand your concerns. But at this point, this is the process the way it is set up, and we need to move forward with this. And again, we have people leaving in the next couple of weeks out of the city clerk's office. And again, you know, we have a clerk who's retiring soon, and I understand your concerns. I do, however, think in this case, and again, I think I'm very proud of the fact that I'm very open, and I've spoken with every one of you, and, you know, I don't think anybody could accuse any of us or myself of, any backroom deals or anything. The clerk looked at my experience and thinks that I'm the right person for this job. I happen to agree with him at this point, so that's all I can say about that. But I do look forward to looking at the process in the future with the ad hoc committee again. This isn't a job that has changed very often, and not so much the assistant, but the clerk's job. Again, we've had 2 clerks since 1960, since 1970, and even before that, I think it was 10 years before that. So I think
But you do see where this would be concerning to some of our residents, where the timing of this is, something to be looked at. We knew that our clerk was aging. We have other folks in city government and in City Hall that are getting older and going to retire. We need to have some kind of continuity plan and not just, jump the gun and just throw someone in there. There has to be some kind of process. And
I agree, and actually, I would argue that in this case, this is a continuity plan where somebody with experience in these things is going to be stepping in, as opposed to, we have an office of 7 people that are going to have 4 people leaving shortly. And again, without that continuity and that knowledge, that institutional knowledge, I think it's going to be difficult even as it is, but I think we'd be even more behind the 8 ball. So you could look at it both ways. I do understand completely what you're saying, and I do think that the ad hoc committee is something that we should be looking at that as we move forward. But at this point, this is the process we have. The clerk appointed me, and that is the process right now. So I understand your concerns, but I think you can look at that both ways too. So.
All right. I have no further questions, Mr. Clerk.
Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello, Mr. Cruz.
Good evening, Councilor.
Good evening, and it is good to see you this evening.
Thank you.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you in person for your 15 years of service to Brockton as its Ward 1 City Councilor. Although we did not serve together long, I learned a lot from you about this job, and so you were a great colleague. So for that, I do thank you.
Thank you.
Now, the city's clerk's office provides essential services to our city and to this council. I think it was wise for this council to establish an ad hoc committee to discuss the modernization of the clerk's office, and I look forward to serving on the committee. Now, as previously stated, the clerk's office has recently lost a valued member of its team, and it's projected to lose a few more valued members of the team, including our city clerk. And when that happens, this council will get back together and have another conversation. But I think in the meantime, it does benefit the city clerk's office to have a qualified employee with real-world experience in customer service and municipal work. And so to that point, Mr. Cruz, if you are appointed, I was hoping you could share with this council some of your short-term goals for the city clerk's office.
Sure. I think the true short-term goals are almost forced on the issue right now. One of the things I did as a director of sales at my company that I just left, I designed onboarding and training for new employees, new sales employees. And the clerk's office is a twofold type of thing. There is the city council side of the job, and there's the customer service side where you're dealing with the public on birth and death certificates and different licenses and things like that. We're going to be bringing in probably 4 new people, and in fact, I've even had conversations with the mayor. We may need to, it's a staff that may need more than that long term, but we may need to be talking about adding to the staff down the road. But the first thing would be hiring some new people, training them, putting together an onboarding process, and making sure that the office doesn't miss a beat. And that may not sound like a big deal, but training 3 or 4 new employees all at the same time, which is essentially what's going to be happening, is not an easy thing to do. So that's the first short-term goal. That's what it is there's going to be a lot of training. And again, I'll sit down and design you can't just say, oh, sit and shadow that person. That's not training. We need to train people in the specifics of the job, but also in customer service in general, because that's what the job is. You're dealing with the public. It's a customer service type job. So that's where my private business experience will take over. That's the biggest short term. And a little bit more into that, after that, one of the things I want to do is, some digitization has been done in the office, but that is something I would focus more on. And also the ability, now every record in the city clerk's office is not available for everybody just to go down and get. You can't just get every birth certificate. But one thing that there are cities and towns that you can get some of these online. And I want to look at the bringing that up and modernizing the office in that aspect so that the public can, I mean, COVID has taught us all, when you don't have to go to a building, it's so much better. So that'd be one of the next things. And then longer term goals, again, to do with onboarding, if I'm there. I think all of us know we could have a better process for onboarding new city councilors. We'll have at least 2 or 3 new councilors in January of this year coming up. We need a process where you can sit down and have a lesson, basically, and it can be modules, you could meet with certain department heads at certain times, but that process needs to be more formalized, and that's something, as a counselor, and that's one of the things, if I move into this job, I'll be the first counselor, at least since 1960, to have served in the city clerk's office, and I think all of us know how much help we need in those jobs. They're part-time jobs, even though the public doesn't seem to think so. They're part-time jobs, and to be able to have somebody who knows what your problems are, I look forward to being that person for you if I get the votes.
Well, I appreciate that answer, and I think a modernization of that office is well overdue, and I look forward to working with you as a member of the ad hoc committee to accomplish that goal. Thank you, Mr. Cruz.
Thank you, Councilor.
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor DeCastro.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Cruz.
Good evening, Councilor.
How does it feel to be on that side of the banister?
It's not fun, although you all look wonderful.
Thank you, as do
Look
you.
better, well, now the Monahan's here, maybe not quite so good, but
So, of course, I had concerns and I had issues, but I researched to find my way through. And the first thing I found was a state law, Chapter 41, Section 18, that says a city may by ordinance establish the office of Assistant City Clerk and prescribe the manner of his appointment and his powers and duties. Okay? So I know we can do it. And I also know, because then I went to our ordinances, that in 1965, the city created the position of Assistant City Clerk. And that person is nominated by the city clerk and confirmed by the council, and holds the office during the term of the city clerk. So then I did some research into what's an appointment, because it's different to be appointed as opposed to going through HR with the worldwide search and all that. And so Black's Law Dictionary defines an appointment as the choice or designation of a person, such as a non-elected public official for a job or duty, especially the naming of someone to a non-elected public office. And the example that they give is Article 2 of the United States Constitution grants the president the power of appointment for principal federal offices, subject to senatorial consent. So I guess tonight, for our purposes, Mr. Zioli is the president and we're the Senate. So in any event, in 2018, Mr. Zioli gave an interview to the Brockton Enterprise, and as part of that interview, he commented that when he started this position in 1992 with the clerk's office, there were 16 employees in the office, 16. And in 2018, there were 6. So I know that years ago there was an assistant clerk, and that the decision was made when that person left not to replace it and to work lean. And the office has been working lean. So I think the addition of a city clerk, of an assistant city clerk, is crucial. I'm just wondering, you touched on your years with the council and also your work. How I see this as having 3 sections. There's being clerk to the council. Mm-hmm. There's dealing with the public and the needs of the public. Right. There's also keeping the records.
correct.
So how will you assist the clerk in keeping those records?
Well, I think, again, getting into digitizing and modernizing I don't know if you ever have been in the vault downstairs, but the records are voluminous, and They need to be digitized, and there has been some work done at this. Some of it's even on microfilm, which at the time was modernizing, but now we need to do more of that. The biggest thing is, I think, that we need to modernize it and computerize the department more so. And again, it may need more people to do that. I mean, when you mentioned how many people used to be there, you know, but everything was done by hand then. So we don't need that many people, but I think that office may need to look at adding some people so we can combine the customer service, the service to the council, and the processing of all the records. So,
I do think that an assistant clerk is warranted. I think it's appropriate right now. I also think somebody has to go in and learn how this all works, given that we're going to be experiencing the departure of several important people who are
Correct.
longtime employees of this office.
correct.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cruz,
Counselor,
I don't think anyone here is going to question your abilities, the service that you've provided to the city. We are all aware of that. But you know, there's an issue here of clarity, and things were not done as clear as they could have been done. In terms of a position becomes available or the city decides to fill a position, I would vote for you anytime. But the problem is that sometimes what gets out into the community is that we are not as transparent as we should be as a city. And that often leaves a bad taste in people's mouths. I don't know if the rest of the council members that are sitting here present today have received the amount of emails that some of us have received in terms of people opposing to, not necessarily to you, but the process. The fact that there was absolutely no advertisement for that position. There was no equal access for people to apply for the position. Again, not to belay the process, but the fact is, I would have supported you from the get-go because I thought you were the most qualified person
I appreciate
to do that. You know, especially when you're coming from this council, to be honest with you. But you know, I'm looking at this a little different than everybody else. I mean, we've talked about customer service. We've talked about the keepers of record. I'm looking at it from the relationship with this body. And to be honest with you, I know the clerk is sitting right here. I sent an email to the clerk's office this afternoon asking for what the law gives me, which is the ability to ask for a citation for one of the individuals that I want to provide a citation to. And it's now 7:20. I didn't get I sent it to the clerk of the council and to the clerk himself. And at 7:20, some 7.5 hours later, not even to say, got your email, received your email. So there's a perception that exists within this building that the council works for the clerk. And the clerk shows up every 3 years asking us for reappointment. So one of the issues that I've had, and I've had it for a long time, and you are aware of this, is that if we actually work for the council, for the clerk, why are we being asked to appoint? And the reason why I say that is because in your resignation letter, you sent a letter to the clerk, to the city clerk, not the clerk of the council, but to the city clerk. It didn't go to the president of this body. It went to the clerk, as if we work for the clerk. And I think we have to kind of look at this and saying, well, wait a minute, let's decide who works for whom here. Because if we are asked every 3 years to appoint a clerk, I'm assuming that we have some authority over that position. And if we don't, why are we being asked to vote for that position? Therefore, the concern that I have is for us to kind of clarify this whole role thing, because right now, if I'm sending an email to the clerk of the council to help me satisfy a constituent, I shouldn't have to beg for it.
correct.
Because the budget says that I have supposedly the support to get those things done. So I shouldn't have to beg for it. And that's one of the things that I hope that as we move forward with this, we wouldn't have to beg just to get a simple citation filled out so that we can, in turn, can actually kind of give the constituent the thing that they deserve. So I'm more concerned of that relationship with the council than anything else, to
And
be
I
honest.
think you know how I feel. The clerk works for the council. And you and I have had this conversation before, and I can't speak to anything this afternoon, I'm not there, and I can't speak to what has happened in the past. I believe the clerk works for the council. If I addressed it to the city clerk, I mean, if you thought it should have gone to the clerk of the council, possibly it should have technically, but to me it was as the keeper of our records and to get it into the, I sent it to the clerk to get it into the files to go to the city council, which is exactly what happened, to notify the city council that I was resigning my spot. Doesn't go to the mayor, doesn't go to the president of the council, it goes to the clerk of the, and it probably should have been addressed to the clerk of the council as opposed to the city clerk. I think you can.
No, I sent it to both, just to make sure that it got, because I needed it for tomorrow.
No, I'm talking about
Oh,
my
okay.
resignation letter.
Oh, okay.
I think you know how I feel, and that goes exactly what I'm talking about, to be the first person, at least since 1960, and maybe longer than that, that has sat in those seats. I know what you need, and I know how you need it and how the office needs to react to that. That is something I can promise you. That's something I really look forward to, is working with and for the council to make sure that you have the tools you need to be good councilors, because I love this body. Resigning was not an easy thing for me. I really miss sitting right there already, but this seemed like the natural extension of my public service. So I'm looking forward and hoping to have this job, but I can't speak to your to what has happened with somebody else. I can tell you that I believe that the city clerk should be serving the councilors. It's one of the, to me, it's the most important thing the clerk does, is help to operate this body, because this is a part-time job, but people expect full-time service. And you can't do that without the help. And you can't do it, oftentimes, that help needs to be technical. When you want to do something and the clerk, I can tell you that in my years, I've had times when the clerk has had to say, oh no, you can't do that, or this is how you do it. And I've said, thank you. I expect, of course, COVID has changed some things, but if I'm down in that office, I expect to see every one of you and hear from every one of you on a regular basis. That's, back before cell phones, I can tell you that I used to sit in J.J. Lyons' office at times. And he was a different kind of clerk, and he was very involved politically. I won't be. I can tell you that even though I have opinions on issues, which you know from my sitting over there, my job now is not to have an opinion on an issue. It's to help you do what you want to do. And if it's 6-5 or 11-0, whatever it is, doesn't matter. My job up there, if I'm there, is to help you do that process correctly. And I'm a big believer in that, because I don't want to sound too over the line, but I love this body. I love this room. I love this chamber. I love what this place is. And what I started to say is, I sat in J.J. Lyons' office, and even councilors that he was fighting with, back then he had a separate line. And again, there were no cell phones. This is set 1972, 73. When that phone rang, he would say, you got to leave. And he took that call from whatever counselor it was, and only those counselors had that direct line. I expect to be the same thing. When you need me, I will be there, whether I'm assistant city clerk or someday clerk. That job is the number one job is to let the staff do its job and make sure they're trained properly and that they're treating the public properly. The clerk's number one job, to me, is to work with the council and make sure they have the tools to be the kind of counselors that they should be for the public. And that's how I can be of public service to the people of Ward 1 and all of the city that I've served from that side before. Now I want to serve to work with you and for you to get those things done. And I know exactly, one of the things I'd like to do is even make those a little more, clean them up a little bit and make them more of a, those citations should have some more space on them for, the mayor gives a citation with all kinds of things on it, and we've always been, now it's difficult because the staff isn't there that the mayor has, but those citations are important things to people, and even though they're fairly easy, or they should be fairly easy for us to do, they're very important to the public when they receive those. I can tell you that I don't care what you give those out for, whether it's a 100th birthday or a Eagle Scout, the families feel so good when they get something like that. And those are the kind of things that I expect to do for the council, because I understand what you need. So I look forward to hopefully serving you in that way.
And finally, there's some folks in this community that feel that we should have term limits or some sort of a limitation in terms of the duration of the clerk's appointment. How do you feel about that?
I think it's something to discuss. I can tell you that if I'm there, I don't intend to be there any long time. I'm a healthy man. I look forward to a healthy retirement with my wife. But I think it is something worth discussing. I'm not a believer in term limits in general in elections. I think we have term limits because every 2 years, your name is on the ballot. So we have term limits. I happen to be a believer in that. I think, is it something the ad hoc committee can look at? I think it's something to look at. I don't want to say whether I'm in favor of it or not right now, because you can also be getting rid of a very good person that way, that, you know, you lose the experience that can make somebody do that job so well. And if you put an artificial limit on the time, and there are questions about fairness for, you know, aged people and all. So I think it's worth discussing, but I wouldn't have an opinion right now whether we should or shouldn't.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Cruz. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Mendez.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening, Councilor.
So I wanted you to speak tonight in relations to possible ethical guidelines of you used to be the city councilor and now you're essentially going to be on the other side, either implementing things that you either voted in favor or against it. And my understanding is that there should have been a waiting period of at least approximately 6 months in order for you to take on that role.
No, as a matter of fact, just I can let you know that I have a ruling from the Ethics Commission. I actually, because of how this appointment is done, I actually could have been appointed the same day I resigned, and I do have copies of that I can give to all of you. So I have a binding ruling from the Ethics Commission on that.
Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Thank you.
Councilor Lally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Counselor.
Mr. Cruz, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm all right. I just want to touch on, you know, I've served with you for a couple of years, and I found your experience, your information invaluable. And you come from a family that has a lot of years of public service, public involvement, and that I think speaks to your favor.
Thank you.
You know, I mean, there's something that, you know, you see in history more than you see presently, of people who've committed their lives to public service or who leave the private sector and they head to public service when they've done what they set out to do, and it's looking to give back. And I think you embody that. As a former member of this body, I found it very interesting, two things you brought up. One, how long it's been since someone who had been counselor served as clerk, although, you know, Mr. Zioli has done a fantastic job. And number two, when you brought up J.J. Lyons and his political activities, and you noted that, you know, you wouldn't be engaged in stuff like that. I think that's very important. I think that speaks to one of the things I was looking for in your appointment. You have a very strong reputation as a historian of not just the city of Brockton, but the council itself, the city government, how it operates, and parliamentarian. You know, what works, what doesn't, what we can do and what we can't. Mm-hmm. And so someone who is conscious of the rules, conscious of procedure, and conscious of the role of the clerk in preserving and protecting the body of the council for future councils to come, I think is very important. So I didn't know if you wanted to touch on that at all, as sort of a curator, a custodian of the traditions and the significance of the body.
Well, I think just the whole idea of the rules of the council, I've had this conversation with our chairman and president before. The reason I've always been a stickler on them, if you don't enforce the rules on the minor times, when the important times come, you lose the moral authority to use those rules. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's so important to follow the rules all the time. And it's easy sometimes to say, oh, don't worry about it, it's not a big deal. But it may not be a big deal today, and the issue we're talking about today, it might not be, but it could be later. And the other part of it is, and Councilor Farwell always teases me about it, I always say, look at the rule of unintended consequences. Sometimes you have to step back and make sure that what you're trying to do is what you're actually doing, because sometimes it doesn't happen. And when you have somebody who takes themselves out of that political spectrum, and I absolutely positively will be, I've had somebody ask me what I think about the idea of how we should elect my replacement. I'm no longer, that's up to you now. I'm no longer in that position. And again, somebody has asked me, and I said, you know, I've talked to 2 or 3 people who are talking about running, and I said, I won't be involved at all. The seat is not my seat, the Ward 1 seat. It's the people's seat. And I mean that, and I mean it sincerely. But that is why those rules and the history is so important. And again, it doesn't mean you can't fix something that was done years ago incorrectly. In fact, I know you're working and we're looking at bringing in some interns on trying to clean up so many of the old ordinances that we have that are either just out of date or contradict state law or contradict each other. And that is a process, by the way. It's another one of the things, Mr. Councilor Thompson, that I would be working on, is trying to work with the council to clean up the ordinances. We have so many that are just out of date or contradictory. So, but that's why it's so important to follow the rules. If you don't follow the rules on the easy times, it's so difficult to then enforce them, because if somebody then is when the public thinks we're pulling something. Because if you do something different on a controversial issue than you did it on a non-controversial issue, the public thinks that you're trying to pull something. And again, that's not what you want the public to think.
Or if we do something different because we think, you know, oh, people are looking, we got to change what we're doing, but we're following the procedure.
Follow the procedure.
Is. So we want to keep following the procedure as is.
And not only that, if you don't follow the procedure properly, then somebody can challenge the ordinance or order that you put in. And then you can be tied up for a long time because you did it incorrectly. And even if, I very seldom think anybody does thing, most of the people that I've ever met in politics are in it for the right reason. But if you did it incorrectly, you can hold up for years in litigation things that you are trying to get done for the people of Brockton. So.
Yeah. No, I think as a parliamentarian, historian, and as a guardian, we'll say guardian, sounds better than custodian.
Well, I'd like to say servant of the council.
Servant of the council, yeah. So to keep.
Because that's, I believe, what the job is.
Yeah.
The job is to serve the body, not individuals per se, but that's how you serve, is to help the individuals be better councilors so that the council as a whole can be a better council.
Right, but the health of the body, so I don't do something that disadvantages my successor.
Not just your successor, but disadvantages the city, because that's what, you're there to serve the city, I'm there to serve, if I'm there to serve you as a body.
And I am glad you touched on, I did speak with you, and what we talked about in part was a project that I'm talking to Suffolk about, Suffolk Law, about going through and examining our ordinances, and that I think would be an important part of your job.
For those of you that don't know, Councilor Lally has put together a possible project with some interns from Suffolk Law School to come in under an internship, and nothing's cast. I've only been involved in the phone yet so far because I have no standing to be in any other part of it, but to bring in some interns to help look at those ordinances and things that we want to look at and say, you know, this is not, these don't work, or these need to be replaced. Because it's not something that, at present, we don't have the staff to really get deep into that right now. So, but I appreciate your work on that, Councilor.
All right, and one final question. You noted that the microfilm was getting a little out of date. Will cassettes be next?
I'd have to look into how, you know, I'd work with, it wouldn't be, but I'd work with the Secretary of State office and the archives to see what's the best way to be doing this nowadays. Oh. And I think some of it's already being done, but I think it needs to be done. Those records need to be protected and codified and digitized, all of them, so.
Appreciate your time, Mr. Cruz. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Monahan?
Yes, thank you. Why did you smirk at me like that?
Councilor.
Good evening, Mr. Cruz. Not so much a question, but sort of a little statement. I think so many things are happening at once right now, especially in the clerk's office. We're losing so many people at one time. I think we're sort of in a unique position to actually have somebody that understands the ordinance of the city, understands what he said, what this job is up here. We're under also how to appoint that person by our own ordinances and mass general laws. That's how we do it. The city clerk appoints him, and we approve or we disapprove. So at that point is that we can talk about we're not happy about it or how it was done or this or that, but I'm glad Councilor Rodriguez came up with that ad hoc committee, so now we can move on. We'll move forward. We have a way of doing this now. We're under this procedure. We follow through with that procedure. In the future, we're going to be changing things that we don't like. Maybe you want to advertise, whatever the deal is, we can look at all these processes and see what we feel most comfortable with. But I just think at this time, we're very lucky to have Tim. Right now, hopefully we vote for him to bring him in, to have the experience, to know what we need. I mean, we've been up here before, and I've seen him correct legislative counsel or a president or whatever on the Roberts Rules or procedure that we're doing ourselves up here. Because like we all know, it is a part-time job, and you don't know every aspect of the job or understand every ordinance or every rule. So at this time, to have this happen at this time and to have him available for us to move forward with this, I think it's a great thing for the city. Obviously, Tony will be up here and explain his duties and actually what they've done all these years. We've been so short-staffed. It's been tough a lot of times to get everything that you want as fast as you want because they're overworked down there. And hopefully, if we appoint you, you're going to work with Tony and get a few more people in there to help out. But I'm happy for you. I've known Tim since 3rd grade, and he still can't sing. But other than that, I think he'd do a great job. And thank you, Mr. Cruz.
Thank you, Counselor.
Councilor Ianieri and then Councilor Cardoza, second round.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mr. Cruz.
Good evening, Dean.
How are you?
Good.
Good. And it's been a pleasure listening to you and answering a lot of the questions that our fellow councilors have been asking this evening and the concerns that they had with how we got to this point with the position. And can't disagree with some of the comments that were made that I wish that we had somehow posted it in a different such way, because I think it did lead us to the fact that, you know, a lot of people publicly were not understanding the situation and how this came about, because in my 18 years of sitting here, it's the first time that I've had a person before me that's applying for or is being considered for the assistant city clerk's job. I can't remember if I might be wrong, but I think the last assistant city clerk, when I came here some years ago, I think, if I'm not mistaken, her last name was Lindquist, I think. I don't know, was it Tony? You?
No, I think Mr. Susi was...
no, Susi was, because that was Mr. Zioli's pick.
Oh, before that.
Yeah, Anna Lindquist was under
Lindquist, yes.
John J. Lyons, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, and then he did have a great secretary in Kay Payton. She was a great secretary, and she knew more about the city clerk's office than the clerk did, to be truthful with you. But in any case, I hear a lot of things that the council is saying in regards to things that need to be fixed, and I think you understand that, and I think that happens every 20, 25 years, 15 years when someone's been in a position for so long that it's time to move on. I guess that's why I'm leaving after 18 years, and I don't say it as a joke. I say it as it's time to move along. I knew when constituency service was getting to be a little bit more of a headache than what it used to be. The good times with somebody that would pat you on the shoulder and say, "What a wonderful job," instead of calling your name as you turn around. So it's a different game today. It really is. But our councilors here will have to take a lesson on what it's like to, you got to hold your breath and bite your tongue a few times, but you'll know when it's time to go. And that's one reason why I'm departing. Not only that, but my many years across the street as well. So
We're on the school committee?
I had a great education there, But I think you realize that things need to be done in that office, and that's not in spite of anyone that's been there. That's just a part of change. Brockton has changed. It's going to continue to change, and I don't say that in a negative way. I say it in a positive way. I think it's still the city of champions and will always be known for that. And I think, a lot of things that you've mentioned can be looked at and taken care of. And I know that I think that you in the position of Assistant City Clerk at this point will start to change some of those dynamics. And then if you're in the possibility of being the City Clerk, then I know you'll move it forward. And like you said, there's a time in your life when you want to also take some time off and, enjoy your retirement. And I appreciate that. And appreciate your years of service, too, as a city councilor.
Thank you.
And as a old-time resident of Ward 3 and someone that ran there some years ago, to be truthful with you, when you were a younger fellow that was, but
Much younger.
much younger,
The
that's
hair was
right.
a different color then.
But you've been a part of the process here in the city, and I think you do a fine job. So, pleasure to have you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr.
Counselor.
Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else before I go to Councilor Cardozo? Councilor Cardozo.
Mr. Cruz, so it's too bad because tonight is not about your experience or if you're a good person or a bad person. Tonight is about, again, a process that I feel was unfair. I feel that you wouldn't even be in front of us if I hadn't mentioned the ordinance stating that you had to be approved by this body.
Oh, no, that's not true, is it?
Well, the way that it came about seems that way to me. And I'm hoping that when we get to the actual clerk position, the full-time position that we have other candidates that we look at, this isn't about experience again. It's not about you. It's about another process that seems unfair in a public eye, in a potential appearance of nepotism, and in a potential appearance of, someone trying to bump up their retirement, all of that other stuff. And we need to move away from that. So my vote is going to be no tonight. Unfortunately, it's too bad because I do respect you as a colleague, but I just don't agree with the process. Thank you.
Just to let you know, it would have come in front of you. It couldn't be done any other way. It's an appointment by the clerk with approval by the city council. So it couldn't have happened without it coming here. And it wasn't, I appreciate that you don't miss things and you look things up and find those, but just so you know, it would absolutely have been here either way. So.
Okay,
'cause
I appreciate
It couldn't
that.
happen otherwise, legally.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, well, the chair, all right, there's been a motion made to recommend favorably. Is it seconded?
Second.
Would the clerk please call the roll?
Cardozo,
No.
Ianieri,
Yes.
Barwell,
Yes.
Lally,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Monahan. Yes. Nicastro.
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Thank you very much, councilors.
Recommended
affirmative.
favorably to the full council. Item number 3.
Ordered, acceptance and expenditure of a donation in the amount of $1,000 from Hawkeye Fence LLC to the City of Brockton Police Department. Invited, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Emmanuel Gomes, Chief of Police.
Chief, do you want to start off?
Hi, good evening, councils.
Good evening.
Good evening, Chief.
Nice to see you again. This is actually very simple. This is a continuous, what we've seen in past weeks. These are donations, and as you see, there is a business name on this. This is just a generous donation after hearing about police canines succumbing to some illness. Some of our businesses have been helping out and donating money for us to replace that dog. This is one that's before you.
Okay. Any questions?
Move to recommend favorably.
On the
Made
motion.
and properly seconded. Councilor Nicastro on the
Thank
motion.
you. Good evening, Chiefs. Thank you for being here. And I don't quite know how to say this, so I'll just say it. I had a call from a resident who had read our agenda online and commented to me, well, if someone gives funds to benefit the K-9 program, does that mean they get breaks from the police? And so I thought I'd bring it to you. I know.
Okay.
Because the sentiment was out there, someone asked me, and I said, well, I'll ask.
Well, I can only tell you, Counselor, that that's not a lot of money. I wouldn't compromise myself with the department, and I definitely wouldn't take a check.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else? All right, on the motion, would the clerk call the roll, please?
Cardozo?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ianary?
Yes.
Barwell?
Yes.
Lally?
Yes.
Mendez?
Yes.
Monahan? Yes. Nacastro?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
9 in the affirmative.
Recommended favorably. Item number 4.
Ordered, acceptance and expenditure of the total grant award in the amount of $5,000 from the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America, Massachusetts Chiefs of Police Association Opioid Prevention Grant to the City of Brockton Police Department, Massachusetts Chiefs of Police Association Opioid Prevention Grant Fund. Invited Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Emmanuel Gomes, Chief of Police, Michelle St. James, Grant Coordinator, Brockton Police Department.
Good evening, Ms. St. James.
Good evening,
Welcome.
Mr. Chairman. Good evening, councilors. This grant, it's a $5,000 grant from the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturing Association through the Massachusetts Chiefs of Police Association, and it is for outreach in terms of substance use disorder, and we're going to be using it also to purchase drug disposal pouches that can be given to people who are homebound, so that all they have to do is, if they have excess prescription medication, they pour it into the little pouches, add some water, seal the envelope, the drugs are deactivated, and these can be put in the trash. So they don't need to go to a drug take-back day, and we can keep these pills out of the hands of kids.
Second?
On the motion?
All right, on the motion, Councilor Cardozo and then Councilor Nacastro.
Thank you. Good evening, Attorney St. James. I just wanted to comment that I saw from the paperwork we were provided with that only 5 of these $5,000 awards were given out statewide. Good work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Mendez.
Yes, on that same note, I was going to compliment on that as well, because it said that out of 14 applications that have been received, only 5 got approved, and that your presentation stood out from the rest. So congratulations.
Thank you very much.
No
I
job
appreciate
well
it.
done. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor.
Councilor Thompson.
Good evening, Ms. St. James. I was wondering, how would a Brockton resident acquire one of the Deterra drug deactivation packages?
We are planning on, the Brockton Police Department is planning on working with the Brockton Housing Authority to distribute them, first in the high rises to people we know can't get out of their homes, and then we'll research further and see where else they would be most useful and distribute them ourselves.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Councilor Lally.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to go off of Councilor Mendez and Councilor Nacastro. There's been a marked increase in the amount of extra support the police department has received since bringing you on, and I appreciate that, and I'm sure they do as well. I hear nothing but good about the work that you bring in.
Thank you very much, Counselor. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else? We have a motion properly seconded. Would the clerk call the roll?
Cardozo?
Yes.
Ianary?
Yes.
Barwell?
Yes.
Lally?
Yes.
Mendez?
Yes.
Monahan?
Yes.
Nacastro?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
9 in the affirmative.
Recommended favorably to the full City Council. Item number 5.
Ordered that the City Council provide authorization to transfer monies from Parking Authority full-time salaries to overtime for $3,000. Invited Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Eric Atkinson, Executive Director of Parking Authority.
Mr. Atkinson.
Thank you, councilors. We're asking for this $3,000 transfer to cover any overtime expense that we may need to have for the rest of this fiscal year. We have money in the budget under our regular salary item due to some vacancies that have been ongoing for a while. The overtime budget's been used to cover coverage at the new Carpenter Garage, snow removal, and anything related to when the movie productions were being done around the city. So we ask that you act favorably on this.
Move to recommend favorably.
On the motion.
Okay. Councilor Rodriguez, did you need recognition?
Yeah, well, after somebody seconds.
Second.
On the motion. On the motion?
You're good?
All right.
Okay. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Chairman, I still have a question on the motion.
Oh, go ahead, counsel.
Did you mean to say that you may need or you need?
We will need.
So how do you know you're only going to need $3,000 for something that hasn't happened yet?
Well, the number was, this was drafted before I took the position.
I understand.
But I do know that we have a couple people that are going to be out on leaves, one in particular for the month of April. So we're hoping that this is going to be enough to cover it. If not, then I would have to ask for more.
But why not wait until you spend the money and come before us to kind of basically pay for what you need or even ask for?
Well, right now, our
quite a bit
overtime
of-
budget is zero, so we need to have a transfer done to continue.
But you're only asking for $3,000 to hold you off for the next 3 months?
Yes.
How much do you spend a month? Do you know? I mean, I know this is
I don't know
before
off the
you.
top of my head.
So you don't know how much you guys spend a month in overtime?
No.
So you think $3,000 will be sufficient?
It may not be.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else?
On the
Counsel Lally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is just, from my understanding, this is for stuff that's already happened. This is just to pay off things that have already,
When the budget was done, it was a 12-month budget, but the
Yeah.
money's been used up in 9. So
yeah.
the money that's been budgeted has been used. This is additional money that's being asked to be put under that line item.
All right, to make up for, a little bit of a shortfall you didn't anticipate.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And we give you 3 now, and if you wind up needing more, then we give you more now instead of us giving you, 10 now and you only needing 3.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Mr. Clarkson, you-
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. I'd like to welcome Mr. Atkinson to his new position, and completely in his defense, he's correct. The need for this money was put together by the parking authority staff before he assumed the position. So I'll gladly provide some clarity. The budget for the entire year for overtime is only $15,000, and so this request for $3,000 was reviewed with our department, and we do believe it's sufficient, and there's more than enough money in the full-time salary line to cover it. As you know, it's not at all uncommon this time of year when there are vacancies in various departments that overtime is used to cover those shifts or those vacancies, and money is used from the full-time salaries to transfer in. So I do believe this is a sufficient amount of money to get us through the year. And again, there are sufficient funds in the current budget to cover them.
anyone else? If not, we have a motion properly seconded. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ianieri,
Yes.
Farwell,
Yes.
Lally,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Monahan,
Yes.
Nacastro,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson,
Yes.
8 in the affirmative.
Recommended favorably to the full council. Item number 6.
Ordered that the City of Brockton does hereby take in fee, in accordance with General Law, Chapter 79, and/or other applicable law, the following described parcels of land, to wit, 18 Highland Street. For further reference, see Plymouth County Registry of Deeds Book 41056, pages 144 through 145. Owners, Raymond Matulis. Amount $420,000. Invited Mayor Robert Sullivan, Megan Bridges, City Solicitor, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Councilors, the mayor is unable to be here tonight, but we have Solicitor Bridges and Mr. Clarkson.
Hello. How are you?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So you have before you an order tonight relative to the public safety complex and 2 parcels on Highland Street, the top of Legion Parkway, that the city is desirous of acquiring relative to the construction of the public safety complex and the creation of parking and green space at the top of Legion Parkway. This particular parcel, this property does not have a mortgage. It is not owner occupied, and the gentleman lives on the North Shore. The authority certainly lies with you all for the eminent domain taking. But for your purposes, I've had conversations with the owner's representative, a broker attorney, who has represented him in these preliminary conversations about the conveyance. And we arrived at the price after a market analysis and negotiation. And that is the general outline of the information on that agenda item. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney Bridges,
Hello.
nice to see you again. I've got a couple questions. One is, what were the property taxes for that property last year? Do you know?
Sure. Well, I have the card. I can certainly tell you. So well, I can tell you the assessed value was 348.70 is the cost approach on the assessed value.
So about $3,000 plus dollars.
Yes, on the $10 on 1,000, or excuse me. Yeah.
Something like that. Okay. You did say that the property is not owned or occupied, but it's not a vacant piece of property.
It is tenant occupied, yes.
Tenants?
Tenant, one tenant,
Only one tenant?
yes. It's a single family.
No, well, actually, maybe I was looking at the front property then.
I'm sorry, are we talking about 18 Highland Street?
Yes.
18 Highland Street is a single-family home that is owned by a gentleman named Raymond Medalis, who lives in Lynn. And as far as I understood, it was rented
Okay.
in a tenancy situation.
I'm not exactly sure how these eminent domain property works in terms of taking people out of it. I mean, I know what it does for businesses, but what about in the case where there are residents, people living in these rented units in a sense? Do we have some sort of a program somewhere where we make sure that these individuals are not finding a place to stay under one of these bridges versus an apartment?
Before we get into that, I'd like to confine us to 18 Highland Street, not just general eminent domain, which can be extremely complicated.
No,
whether it's residential or
Mr.
commercial.
Chairman, that's not what I'm asking for. She said that that property was tenant occupied.
That's correct.
So I'm saying, we're taking this property away from the owners. What are we going to do as a city? Because it's the city taking the property away. What are we going to do to help the individual who is paying rent on that property to find suitable housing, if anything?
Yes, Mr. Counselor. So the law contemplates a relocation assistance, in terms of monetary support. Normally, the selection of a relocation agent and the development of a relocation plan is not triggered unless there are 5 or more displaced persons. So there may or may not even be a displaced person in this conversation, frankly, because the landlord-tenant relationship could have already dissolved. But kind of to your point, about public policy, I think that's what you're getting at. And there's 4 months that the person would have by law before any type of eviction situation would happen. And the city would assist these folks in working with the BRA in identifying suitable housing, or working with relocation agents or programs that already exist, like RAFT, for example, if that were, necessity.
Because I want to make sure that, yes, we are, taking these properties because we need them for the purposes that we have, but I want to make sure that we're not displacing people as well. Because it's different when you're taking basically either a boarded up business or something that's boarded up, but if we have individuals living in those homes, I want to make sure that we do take care of them before we just toss them out.
Myself and my department are committed to following the law, and the law certainly contemplates the need to work with folks who may be displaced because of eminent domain takings. So the prerogative would not be to, just sort of come in hot, we own this place now, you got to go. No, there is, like I said, working with the BRA specifically because they are a relocation agent as defined by DHCD. And if necessary, formulating a plan, a management plan, a relocation management plan.
And could you do me a favor and just keep me in the loop when that process goes through, because I'd be interested to make sure that these individuals are taken care of. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Councilor Cardoza?
I just have a quick question, Attorney Bridges. Are the owners or any of the tenants allowed to partake in these conversations when this is new to me, so I'm just trying to, do they ever have a say in the process?
So in this instance, I could affirmatively state that the owner has had a say and they're represented by a lawyer and a broker. And then certainly all of these public meetings, just like every other meeting you have, is open for the public to both, have knowledge and notice about and participate to a reasonable degree. The law does not require a public hearing to transpire here to allow public comment on these particular pieces. It is treated in the same fashion as a normal public meeting with a 48-hour notice requirement. And then if the council does, in fact, adopt the order of taking, then specific notice is sent to any lien holders or anyone that the title exam finds that has an interest in the property. Okay. And you're not specifically asking this, but, the city is not hiding the ball. Internally, the assessor's office, the CFO, the mayor, myself, we met, we identified the property owners, we looked at the property card, we reached out to these folks. The process is a little confusing, but in terms of participation, it would be the same level that the public is invited for every other type of meeting in front of you.
So for the purpose of the council and our vote tonight, do we have access to any more information from the owners or the folks that reside there? In making our decision, I'm just trying to figure out the process a little more. Is there ever any, do we get any, because all we have is that we're doing this, but we don't have any other documentation to support.
So the law in Massachusetts is sort of, much like Massachusetts is a foreclosure statute on the papers. There is not, you don't get a hearing whenever you're going to get foreclosed on in most instances. This is a similar situation as contemplated by the law. There is not conversations happening outside of this room that you don't have in front of you in terms of information, other than my direct correspondence with the owner or the owner's agent.
Okay. I just have a sense that this isn't an easy thing for the owner.
I don't want to speak for anyone.
Good to have, some information from them.
There was no mortgage on this place, and frankly, the folks jumped on the idea. There was no contemplation. It was excitement on their part, from my perspective.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Nicastro, and then Councilor Thompson.
Good evening, Attorney Bridges.
Hello.
I don't want to delve into the law of eminent domain, which I know is thick and confusing. We're following the law.
We are following the law.
As to this, right?
We are following the law.
Okay, and you and I have spoken about this separately as well. And the owner will be reimbursed, will be paid in accordance with your appraisals on the agreed upon price.
Correct.
Okay. So the owner will be made whole, in a sense.
Correct.
And the tenant will be provided with more help in relocating than certainly if this was a mortgage foreclosure situation, which I am familiar with.
Absolutely.
So the tenant will be helped to find a new location.
The city will do whatever is necessary or desirous of the owner or the tenant in order to effectuate a smooth relocation process.
Okay. And can you tell me the size of the lot that this property is located on? Approximate square footage?
Yes, it is 7,000 square feet primarily. Or, excuse me, approximately, not quite a quarter of an acre.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few quick questions, Madam Solicitor. First one, if there is relocation required, is that part of the 420, or would that be from another pot outside of that monies?
The 420 does not contemplate relocation assistance if it's needed by these tenants. It would be extra money.
Understood. Secondly, 420,000, is that fair market value or above?
It is fair market value. So the price for eminent domain is defined in an interesting way. It is the highest and best use of the property, and what a seller would be willing to take today, you know, the highest price that a buyer would be willing to pay for this particular use. So there's sort of like three methodologies that help support the price. In this case, it's not really an income property because it's just a single-family home. So market approach and analysis and an appraisal is the method that we used here. And it is it's fair market price, just compensation.
Understood. And then lastly, other than these two properties that are before us today, is there a contemplation of any other properties in this area that you would be thinking about taking?
So in line with Council President's comments, you know, maybe they would be brief, but the city has identified 99 Warren Avenue as the parcel that is adjacent to both of these, that also touches on the footprint of the public safety complex.
That's the one right at the corner, the big gray
Hollow
building?
House.
Okay.
Yes,
And you're currently in negotiations for that building as well?
we are.
Okay. Understood. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
Motion for favorable recommendation.
Okay, motion has been made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. One clarification, did I hear the word negotiated for the public? In other words, this is not a contentious taking. This is after you have had repeated meetings with the property owner, is that correct?
So I don't want to confuse anyone, and also, you know, need to remind folks that, you know, not every comment or thought that I have is appropriate for public comment, because, you know, I am charged with defending the city and bringing claims on behalf of the city. So, but just sort of a quick synopsis on eminent domain, the goal is to always arrive at a negotiated price. However, whether or not I have stood up here in front of you and affirmatively told you that these folks have agreed to accept 420, the law still allows them to bring a lawsuit. The law just confines when interest may be due and payable if the city owes more money to the property owner. So the negotiations have been colorful and eventful, and, you know, for the two that are in front of you, we've arrived at a price. For the one that's not in front of you, we're still negotiating a price.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question on the motion?
On the motion, Councilor Cardoza.
I'm just not feeling confident and comfortable in voting on this without more information. And I understand that there's some legalities, but I think it's unfair for the council to vote on something that we don't have the information from the parties that are involved. I just have a problem with that.
Is there some, like, particular question that you have?
I don't know. I just feel like it would be good to hear from these people as to, you know, the negotiation process, if it's something that they're comfortable with. I mean, this home is beautiful.
So you might be confusing the two. So 26 Highland is the one we haven't got to yet, and that home has recently been renovated. And
I'm talking about both of them. It's just a tough thing to vote on something that you have very limited. This is what the city's telling us, but then we don't know what the folks that are giving up their home are saying.
And I guess for your comfortability purposes, eminent domain is just a process that the law contemplates that you have the authority to exercise for the public good, where the public good outweighs whatever the opportunity cost is for the party on the other side.
But the public good would be something that, to me, we're endangering the public. This isn't something, we're knocking down these things to put up a public safety complex. It's not something that is an emergency or a need to protect the, you know, this isn't a crack house. You know what I mean? To me, it just doesn't make sense to vote on something where you don't have all of the information, and you don't know what the other parties are thinking or what they've negotiated. So just, I don't know, just doesn't make sense to me.
All of the information that is available you have in front of you. There have been conversations with these folks. And I think that if anyone was wanting your attention on this subject matter, that, you know, your contact information is publicly available. And then sort of the last piece, just, you know, that I would offer Councilor Cardozo is that this area has been looked at by the city for quite a long time for both reasons of blight, transportation reasons, and sort of redevelopment reasons for the city. So if your sort of concern, you know, is directly tied to the public safety complex, which I am not here to offer, policy comments on that, then I would suggest, you know, that you consider these other things, like, you know, the Apollo House, which is not in front of you right now, but 99 Warren Ave has been a site of blight for the city for a very long time and contemplated for taking by the BRA. You know, so, and then the item that we haven't gotten to yet, the next agenda item, Highland number 26, those folks are building a brand new home in the city and moving on to that. So they're staying here and they're fulfilling, you know, what I would characterize as a dream for them. So if that sort of provides you any more information about how deep these conversations have gotten with these folks, it just so happens that this particular one, the owner is absent and he's, you know, ready to let it go. So that is just...
That helps some. How long have you been in conversations with them? How long has this been going on?
January.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
The chair would say in general, that's why Erin and I try to get the packet out to you by Wednesday, hopefully Thursday at the latest, before a meeting, so that if there isn't information that you feel is essential, you pick up the phone and call, or you come down to City Hall and talk with Solicitor Bridges. So I hope that our efforts aren't for naught. I mean, anytime the agenda comes out, please reach out to the appropriate person and ask for the information so that when they come in here, they'll have it before him or her and they can share it with us. But there's been a motion made and properly seconded.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Council Cardozo, before I signed on to this as my ward, I made sure, are these people happy? What's going on? And like she said, that guy's moving on, building a new home, the other one's out of town. So as far as I know, and the information I was given, it was a good deal for them, and the price they got. And that's my understanding. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, there's been a motion made and properly seconded. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Cardozo.
Yes.
Ianary.
Yes.
Farwell.
Yes.
Lally.
Yes.
Mendez.
Yes.
Monahan.
Yes.
Nicastro.
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
8 in the affirmative.
Recommended favorably to the full city council. Item number 7.
Ordered that the City of Brockton does hereby take in fee in accordance with General Law, Chapter 79, and/or other applicable law, the following described parcels of land, to wit, 26 Highland Street. For further reference, see Plymouth County Registry of Deeds Book 38395, pages 94 through 95. Owner Richard and Lenevie M. Henry. Amount $440,000. $440,000. Mayor Robert Sullivan, Megan Bridges, City Solicitor, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Make a motion for favorable recommendation.
Second.
On the motion,
On the motion, Council Rodriguez.
can we at least let the attorney talk about a little bit about this before we can vote on this?
I might have confused the subject matter a little bit because I referred to this one. This is a single-family occupied home, and these folks are looking forward to moving on to a new home in Brockton that is new construction. And we have been in discussions with them since at least the month of February. And I think that they are eager to move on.
Questions?
Go ahead, Councilor.
Thank you. Attorney Bridges, good evening again. Is the law being followed as to this eminent domain taking?
It is.
Okay. And the owners have agreed to a price, and you believe it to be the fair market value of the property?
I do.
Okay. And since it's owner-occupied, we don't have to be concerned about tenants?
We don't. We would still need to deal with relocation, even though they are, an owner-occupied, but because they had identified something before the taking occurred, they're not technically displaced persons, and we certainly would not make them move out until their new home was ready to be moved into.
Okay.
We've had those conversations.
And what is the size of the lot?
It is very similar. They're almost the same exact, 7,000 square feet, .165 total acres.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Rodriguez, I apologize. I didn't cut you off, did I?
Well, you did, but that's okay.
Okay, it will never happen again, I assure you.
I thank you.
I will repent.
Thank you. No, I just wanted to touch on something that we kind of brought up real quick. I mean, I know the president basically said that these things are mailed out, but a lot of times when we ask these questions, we're not asking it for ourselves. We're asking it for those people who are watching us at home or listening to us, that they can hear that it's not just us being informed, but the community that's being informed as well. And these questions come up on a regular basis in terms of, you don't want to be known as a city that displaces people. We know there's a great deal of, we have a housing shortage in the city. I mean, people, I know that every time somebody comes up, everybody, oh, we don't want any affordable homes in our community. But you know, the affordable homes that we have, if we keep taking them down and making parking lots out of them, we're going to need more affordable homes. You know, so we can't have it both ways. Either we have affordable homes and keep them, or if we keep taking them down, we got to build affordable homes. So that's why, you know, some of us bring up these questions. It's not, and I brought this up when we were discussing the public safety building. I am for public safety building. I've wanted it for the longest time. But the reason why we need to sometimes ask questions is so the folks that are watching us at home can get a sense that their concerns are being addressed, not just from my looks or good feeling, but the fact that it's their concerns that we're addressing. So when people hear that we're taking down 2 single-family homes, a lot of times it's very different than a business that's being taken down. That's why we gotta do our due diligence to make sure that we're crossing the T's and dotting the I's as we move forward, because it's not just for my own consumption. It's supposed to be for the folks that put us here to make sure that we ask the right questions. And my concern was not necessarily with this home, but it was the one previously, because yes, the homeowner is going to be thrilled that he's getting $420,000 for a piece of property, but those poor folks that are paying him rent on a regular basis are going to be displaced. Not him, the tenants. And I wanted to make sure that the tenants are taken care of as well, because I see this every day when people knock on our doors looking for a place to stay, and I can't direct them to a bridge around City Hall, because that's not going to do us any good. But thank you for the work that you did on this. Hopefully we'll get this thing moving and all the parties will be taken care of and we can move forward with this project. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Anyone else? If not, I believe we have a motion that's been made and properly seconded. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Cardozo?
Yes.
Ianary?
Yes.
Farwell?
Yes.
Lally?
Yes.
Mendez?
Yes.
Monahan?
Yes.
Nicastro?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
9 in the affirmative.
Recommended favorably to the full city council. Thank you, Solicitor
Thank you.
Bridges.
Thank you.
Item number 8.
Ordered pursuant to Chapter 20, Section 20-2 of the revised ordinances of the City of Brockton, the street to be constructed as part of the so-called Trinity development between Main Street and Montello Street, and which will intersect with Petronelli Way, shall be named Marvin Hagler Drive. Invited Robert May, Director of Planning and Economic Development.
Mr. May is not available tonight. Councilor Thompson and I filed this, so Councilor Thompson, take over.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councilor Farwell reached out to me and discussed naming this new street which intersections Petronelli Way, Marvin Hagler Drive, and to be honest, I thought it was a fantastic idea. So, you know, I do wish Mr. May was here just to discuss some of the technical aspects of the location of the street, the length of the street, maybe some of the prospective buildings that would be along this street. But most of my remarks, I wanted to hold off until the final vote. But this is an appropriate naming of this street. It's I think, serendipitous that it intersects with Petronelli Way and the garage in which, the boxing gym in which Marvin Hagler trained. So it's the perfect location with an appropriate name in honor of a great Brocktonian, and I ask that this council recommend it favorably, this committee recommend favorably to the full city council. I'll make a motion to recommend it favorably to the full city council.
Motion made and seconded. On the motion, Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm not in opposition to this at all. As a matter of fact, I thought we would be doing a lot more for Marvin Hagler since he did a great deal for the city. Because in the age of television, not a single place that you went to didn't know who Marvin Hagler was in terms of what he did for this community. But there's a group of individuals here in the city led by, I think, Johnny Marion that actually had approached me when I was the mayor here in the city, and we had gotten some funding from the state to redo that road. There was a discussion in terms of creating a little park in honor of Marvin Hagler, and this is long before he passed. So I hope that we're going to take that into consideration in terms of moving forward with this, thinking that we're not just naming a street after this guy, but we do put the effort in place to make sure that a park is built with the statue that this group has actually been working on to bring into the downtown area. And I think it will be a fitting tribute for someone that has done, in my opinion, a great deal for this community. I know we talk a lot about Rocky Marciano, deservingly so, but equally to somebody that actually was born within the Hagler era. Marvin meant a lot to us, especially being a youngster in college. It served a great deal to know that Brockton had a heavy world champion in the sense, and I hope that we do a lot more than just naming a small portion after someone that's deservingly so and is someone of color. When we sit down and think about it, it seems that we name driveways pretty well for folks of color in this city, so I hope that we can actually do something that's more dignifying so that it's not going to go by the wayside as Frederick Douglass has gone in the last few years, so that this area becomes a little more recognized and we can do a lot more to promote what this man did to this community in this city. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Anyone else? If not, there is a motion to recommend favorably. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Cardozo?
Yes.
Ianieri?
Yes.
Farwell?
Yes.
Lally?
Yes.
Mendez?
Yes.
Monahan?
Yes.
Nicastro?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
9 in the affirmative.
Recommended favorably to the full council. Item number 9.
Ordered that Chapter 39, Section 23D of the Massachusetts General Laws be and hereby is accepted by the City of Brockton. Said Section 23D, Judiciary Hearing Absent Member. Invited, Legislative Counsel Shannon Resnick.
As you know, councilors, Legislative Counsel is unable to be here this evening. Councilor Nicastro, you filed this, and I know you're very familiar with
Yes.
3923D, so would you enlighten us?
Yes, and I will say, for backup, I've asked City Solicitor Bridges to remain, and actually, she and I worked on this together. And so she will be available for expert comment, okay? And so I will give you the background on this. I served on the planning board from 2009 to 2013. And while I was on it, the planning board had some very complicated matters that were being continued from month to month. and different personnel would be there. At that time, the planning board consisted of 9 members. We didn't often get all 9 at the table. And so the planning board asked the law department for an opinion as to voting requirements, and could someone who is absent from a meeting ultimately vote on the matter if they had not heard all of the testimony over the various meetings. And what came back from the then Assistant City Solicitor was that since the city had not adopted General Laws, Chapter 39, Section 23D, then everyone had to be available to be able to vote. They had to have sat at a hearing to ultimately be able to vote on the matter. And that's really hard in real life, and that's why the state legislature enacted this Chapter 3923D, because what it says is that members of a committee will not be disqualified from voting on a matter solely because a member had been absent from no more than one single session of the hearing at which testimony or evidence was received. It's just that that absent person, to be able to vote, they have to certify in writing that they've examined all of the evidence that was received at the missed session, which includes audio or video recording or a transcript thereof, and then make a written certification as to that review that becomes part of the record of the hearing. Now, I should tell you, this absence, not only does it apply to the city boards and commissions, I think it also applies to the city council. So I think it's long overdue that the city adopt this section of the state law to enable us to, in real life, act on things even if we miss a meeting. And I would at this time ask City Solicitor Bridges if she would like to say anything additional on that.
Any objection? The chair hears none. Solicitor
Okay.
Bridges.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilor Castro is exactly right. You know, and the point of the statute is not to encourage folks to miss meetings, because you still can only miss one meeting. That is not the point. But the point, as some of the boards are lighter in membership at the moment, like Planning Board is coming to mind, for example, those folks are really restrained in the work that they can do without the Mullins Rule adoption. And for any matters that have already been started, when there is no quorum that exists, as in a project could not get approved by the current sitting members, then the process has to almost start over. And that is really unfair to the applicant because they don't control the board membership. And emergencies happen. And, you know, so for those like sort of 2 real reasons, I think it makes sense. And adopting it and having a record of it, whether or not a court, you know, judge or jury would really sort of hold your feet to the fire over it, having adopted it in the record, if there's ever a question, is the preferable course of action, other than, well, it's not that big of a deal, so we don't need to do it.
Thank you. And I would just add as a PS, I attend a lot of meetings of the boards and commissions on a monthly basis because it just seems like Ward 4 is active in front of all of the boards and commissions. And I would honestly have to say that most of the boards and commissions are not aware of this requirement, that their members shouldn't be voting on something if they had not been there for the entire hearing. And I think this is an opportunity to address that. Maybe a little bit of guidance will come out of the law department if this is passed by the city council. And also I would ask the law department to create that form to be filled out to have that certification added to the record of the hearing. Okay?
All set?
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else? Councilor Cardozo.
I just have a question about examining the evidence. So the committees will certify that they've examined all of the evidence. That can be a challenge if they don't have access to the applicants and are able to speak with them. So part of sitting on the committees is not just examining the evidence. I'm thinking of zoning when I sat on zoning board, but it's also listening to the applicants and listening to folks that are for a project or against a project. So I just see a lot of challenges in having somebody vote if they haven't gone through that entire process.
I guess it occurs already. It occurs already. And so this adoption would provide a mechanism and a certification that folks would have to acknowledge. Because right now, it is sort of a self-serving attestation that is not formal in any fashion, but they still vote and they still participate. So to your concern, this would be drawing to, an appointee or member's attention what the requirements are. And then, when you have to sign your name on something, I think that holds a little bit more weight than nobody asking you if you've prepared at all.
Yeah, I just find it a little tricky. Would it be at the discretion of each committee how they roll this out, or would it be across the board?
It would be it would be an adoption of the state law that allows somebody to participate in ultimately voting if they have not attended every single meeting. But that already occurs.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, Counselor. Anyone else before I go back to Counselor Nicastro? Counselor Nicastro.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councilor Cardozo. If we could say anything good has come out of COVID, it is that the city was forced to start videotaping, recording all the meetings of the boards and commissions, okay? You have the ability now to watch a license commission meeting and all of the others that we didn't have before. Most towns allow recording of their board and commission meetings, and they play it back ad nauseum. And yet we weren't doing that. And this is just so much better and so right. And so because of our recording these boards and commission meetings, a member of a board or commission would be able to go to YouTube, the Brockton Channels, and watch it and listen to the comments from the people who attend or their letters being read. It will be better. It would be more possible now than it would have been possible before. And so I wanted you to be aware of that.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I just ask a procedure question?
Yeah.
Does this have to go to any subcommittees, or we just vote on this tonight?
It would go back to the full council, and then it would
So it doesn't have to go to
voted on to
ordinance or
accept.
anything?
No, it would go to the full council to be accepted, formally accepted.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone
Thank you.
else? I think we have a motion that's been made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Cardozo,
Yes.
Ianary,
Yes.
Farwell,
Yes.
Lally,
Yes.
Mendez,
Yes.
Monahan,
Yes.
Nicastro,
Yes.
Rodriguez,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
9 in the affirmative.
Recommended favorably to the full council. Item number 10.
Ordered that the City Council of the City of Brockton petitions the Great and General Court for special legislation relating to the City of Brockton to be filed with an attested copy of this order, and order be and hereby is approved under the provisions of Clause 1, Section 8 of Article 2, as amended, of the Articles of Amendments to the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, to the end that legislation be adopted as follows, except for clerical or editorial changes of form only. Petition for special law regarding filling vacancies of Brockton City Council ward seats during the year 2021. Invited Legislative Counsel Shannon Resnick.
Councilors, we don't have Attorney Resnick here this evening. We could proceed, or we could postpone to the next FinCom meeting. Your choice. Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I honestly believe that here's another one of those procedural things. According to the charters of this city, we are to hold an election to replace an award counselor. And since we have discussed here several times on this body, some of us feel that it's an unnecessary cost, and it's something that we have to move forward and figure out a way to do this. So I think in order for us to stay within the legalities of the law, we got to do two things: either hold an election or petition the state to allow us to have some sort of an appointment of the position that we are currently discussing. So I feel that I think we owe it to the residents and the taxpayers of this community to move this point forward. And act on it in the sense, go through the whole process and let the process fall as it may, because I'm going to go back to what happened a couple years ago in terms of the passage of the ordinance that we tried here in the council. With the Brockton ordinance that we tried to pass, and one of the reasons why some councilors felt against it is that they didn't want to violate federal laws, and therefore they couldn't support this. So therefore, if it's what we are afraid of violating laws, we must move this thing forward, because violating one law because it suits us is not the answer that we're looking for. Therefore, I actually move that we move this point forward to the full city council for its appreciation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Well, on the motion.
On the motion, Councilor Thompson, and then Councilor Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do believe that we need to move forward on the home rule amendment, but without legislative counsel here, I believe I had a few questions. Would I have the opportunity to ask legislative counsel these questions at the full city council meeting next week to clarify my questions?
Yes, you would.
Okay. So then if that's the case, then I would not have a problem moving forward today on this matter.
Councilor Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councilor Thompson basically addressed what I was going to say. The discussion and deliberation that we would have with Attorney Resnick, we can just have next week. And I do believe it benefits this body to keep moving this forward and not lose 2 weeks by postponing. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilor Cardozo and then Councilor Nicastro.
Just a clarification on what we're moving forward. So we've already, for the public, we've already filed the home rule petition. We have not?
No.
No.
That's what this does.
So my understanding was that we did do that from last meeting. So there is some confusion, and I think folks in the from what I've seen, are under the impression that we've done that. So we haven't filed anything with the state.
No.
So this would be, we would be voting on filing this with the state next week if we move this favorably.
On the 19th.
Okay, so that's, okay. So we need to act on this, because I was under the impression that that's what we did, because there was comments about 2 counselors, Councilor Monahan, Councilor Rodriguez, had filed this with the state. So that was inaccurate. And
No,
Through the chair.
Councilor Rodriguez.
Councilor Cardozo, what we did was basically file the order to the city council for the city council to decide on, so that we can, once the council gives us the okay to move forward, we've got the order that's going to go into the state. But it's a step that we need to follow, which it can't just be Councilor Monahan and myself.
That's what I thought, and I believe I asked that question.
We introduced it to the council,
Okay.
but it's up to the council today and then next week to vote favorably in order to move it forward.
Thank you, I appreciate that. That's what I thought, but I believe I asked that question and it wasn't clear from our legislative council last time, and it created some confusion in the public, where the public feels that this has already happened. So we have to be more clear with this stuff. So I would ask that we move forward so we can expedite this.
Councilor Nicastro.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I have a copy of the Charter, Section 59A, in front of me, and it deals with 2 scenarios. The first scenario is if there's a vacancy among the 4 counselor-at-large positions, and it calls for the vacancy to be filled forthwith by a majority vote of the remaining members of the council. And of course, we lived this a few years ago. Okay, I don't have to say anything more. The second scenario it deals with is if a vacancy occurs before the last 6 months of the term in the office of a counselor elected by and for the voters of a ward. In that case, the city council forthwith orders an election to fill the vacancy for the remainder of the unexpired term. Councilor Rodriguez has explained to us why he made this he's putting this forward, and why he and Councillor Monahan think this is a good idea. To get a home rule petition so the legislature will approve our not having that special election, and then to appoint someone to fill that term. I have to say, I don't feel qualified as the ward councillor in Ward 4 to appoint someone to fill the shoes in Ward 1. I really don't. And what I would like to see happen here in a perfect world is not substitute my judgment for who should be in Ward 1 for a couple of months, and instead, I'd like to see us amend this home rule petition to let it go forward, to ask the legislature to not make us have that special election. And instead, let's just sit. Let's just let this seat remain open, because we know in real life that the Ward 1 is amply represented by the 4 councilors at large who represent the entire city. So it's not like they will be without representation. But I'm very uncomfortable with substituting my judgment on who should represent Ward 1 for a couple of months, just as I would be uncomfortable if someone else was going to step into my shoes, my small shoes, representing Ward 4. And so I've thought about this. I've done research on it. There has to be a reason why the charter, written all those years ago, wants to go one way for a councillor at large and another way for a ward councillor. But I would like to respect the charter to the extent that we can. I'm less fazed by the cost of having a special election. First it was $12,000, now it's in the 30s. I understand that. What I think is of greater concern, though, to avoid a special election is to avoid bringing people together if we possibly can because of COVID-19. Okay, I am hopeful that our numbers will continue to go down. By the time we have our preliminary election in mid-September, we'll be looking really good, and why mess with that? That, to me, is crucial, and that's an emergency that's worth going for a home rule petition on. But I would really prefer, if you'd all consider, I would like to amend this home rule petition so that we're not substituting our own judgment for a couple of months, someone to represent Ward 1. I would like the seat to remain open. Thank you. Well, there's already a motion on the floor that has been seconded. So I guess unless there's more conversation about it, perhaps we'd consider withdrawing that motion. I feel very strongly about this. I just don't think we have the right to substitute our judgment.
On the motion?
On the
Make a
motion.
comment. So I would just, you have some valid concerns, Councilor Castro, but I would remind you that when it came time to replace Councilor Rodriguez when he became mayor, we didn't have this discussion. So that person was appointed when we have 3 councilors at large. We didn't necessarily need another 4th councilor at large. We could have left that seat open, but we went ahead and appointed someone. So I would be very careful in how we do this now that it's, the tables are turned. And I believe that the Ward 1 deserves representation. We still have quite a few months before we appoint, before that person who's elected in the fall takes their seat in January. So, I appreciate we have 4 councilors at large that represent the entire city, but when it came time to replace one of us, that was an easy decision to do, and we appointed someone. So I'd look at that as well.
Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Castro.
Through you to Councilor Cardozo, I just mentioned what the charter said and the way that it treats a councilor at large vacancy differently than a ward councilor vacancy. We followed our charter in replacing Councilor Rodriguez at the time that he was elevated. We followed our charter. We're not following our charter here. And that is my concern. For a ward councilor, the charter does not specify that there should be an appointment by the remaining members. It specifies a special election.
I appreciate that, but I still would say that there's quite a few months before January of next year for the ward to not have representation.
I would bet that we wouldn't be having an election, a special election for Ward 1, much before June or July. And we already know our preliminary election is in September. So I've been thinking about that a lot. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor
Thank you, Mr.
Thompson,
Chair.
did you seek recognition?
I did, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that. And that's why, that's kind of Councilor Nicastro's position is one in which I wanted to ask the Legislative Council about our ability to determine how this either no special election, leave the matter vacant, allow for an election, and that person takes their position in January. Is that an option, or does the charter require either a special election or an appointment? So I just think there's maybe some clarification on that issue, and then our experts not here to discuss it, but if we do not move forward with the with the special election, what are our options? Do we have to appoint if there's no special election, or can we allow the matter to be just forego special election, forego appointment, and then allow for the regular general election to happen and that person takes the seat in January? I think that would inform whether I would be amiable to an amendment of the home rule petition.
All right, have you concluded? And Councilor Ianieri, you haven't spoken on this yet.
No, I have not. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the last time when we did speak upon it, the issue was about having the special election towards the issue that I had mentioned, and I think somewhat even what Councilor Nicastro mentions, is the fact that you're only about 2 weeks away from picking up your nomination papers for those of you that want to run for election or re-election. I think, and I agree with what Councilor Nicastro said, by the time you have it, and I think the executive of the voting department mentioned to us that by the time you get everything together, get the labels that have to be done, all the ballots printed and everything, you're going to be into June and July, and you're already wrapping yourself into a mix-up with the campaign that's already going on out there. So what's an extra month? It doesn't make sense. I mean, that's my way of looking at it. I mean, I think Ward 1 will be represented. I've said it as well. You have 4 qualified councillor at large people here. Councillor at large job, I always thought was and has been, and for me, anytime I went away and Councillor Petty lived in Ward 3 and I was away for a week, I'd say, Councillor Petty, would you take care of my calls? I'll check them out and I'll give them to you. Would you do, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's their job, and that is their job. But I just think that by doing this and having a special election just doesn't make sense to me, and it's not going to make sense to some of the people as well. I'm not saying Ward 1's going to be disqualified from not having somebody, because they will have somebody. They'll have people that are going to run. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be running this year as well, and we all know that. But you're just bumping into another situation, and I mean, I come up on the heels on Councilor Rodriguez in regards to this, because I think it's the right way to do. I understand we want to wait and hear from our legal counsel, and we can still hear from her next week when she's here, and then make that final decision. But that's where I lie on it. It's the last time I'm going to speak about it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Councilor Monahan, you haven't spoken on this yet, I don't believe.
Yeah, it just basically, I mean, we talk about following the charter. We are following the charter basically because following is the amount that is left in his term, but the charter calls for a special election. So all we're doing is with COVID and with the cost, is taking that out of the picture and asking to have representation before one, as the charter says, by doing what we're doing and going with home rule petition and then voting and appointing one ourselves. So I think the gist of the charter we're following. We're just going into about a little different way. So, and it is saying with the amount of time that's left, we're supposed to do that. So, we're just doing it a different way. So, that's. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Councilor Lally, have you spoken on this yet?
No, I have not.
All right, Councilor Lally, and then Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would be inclined to agree with my colleague, Councilor Nicastro. The simple fact of the matter is a councillor at large receives votes from the entire city. So the ward councilors and the other councilors at large who have been elected by collectively either their wards or the entire city would, it makes sense, you know, that they are acting in the way the government is formed on behalf of their voters to appoint a vacant councilor at large seat. The ward seats are different, and that's why I believe the charter was set up differently for the ward seats. There are no duplicates of ward councilors. I'm the only councilor for Ward 6. Ward 1 only has one councilor. And a councilor at large, while they do receive votes from every ward, including whatever ward may be in question, they do not necessarily have to you know, have to win that ward. Theoretically, all of our councilors at large could not have received, you know, the number of votes to win from Ward 1. Theoretically, I don't believe that's the case. I believe they did, but the ward does not. You can't flip it backwards. You can't do, you know, what we're looking to do the way this is set up. Everyone in the city votes for councilors and councilors at large. Not everyone in the city votes for the ward councilor of a specific ward. So I don't believe that it's in our best interest to have a special election, but I don't believe it's, you know, in line with the charter to go out and appoint someone instead, especially coming up upon this election. We don't want to wind up appointing a candidate and give them, I know it won't be much time, but give them a little time that could be inferred as an advantage. We don't want to appear to be picking a winner in this race. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Rodriguez?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we're confusing two things here. I think we're confusing that we actually have an opinion on this matter, which we do not. The law is very clear. Either you hold an election or you petition the state for some leeway so you can actually appoint the person that goes into that position. It's not based on what I think or don't think, or what do I agree or don't agree. If it was up to me, it wouldn't have mattered, but it's not up to me. The charter, the constitution of the city states that when there's a vacancy, we, the council, must hold an election. We must vote for and approve an election. The only way we cannot hold an election is by petitioning the state so that we're not being held to the description of the constitution of the city known as the charter. So it's not based on whether or not I want to hold an election, I want to appoint someone, I don't want to appoint someone. We must follow the law. And the law states that we schedule an election. If we don't want to schedule an election, then we go by this other route. There's no buts and ifs about it. It's not what Moses thinks about this. It has nothing to do with me. It has to do with what the law states. And the law states that we must do this. And we don't have a choice. It's not like it's not in the best of it. A lot of things that are done in this city are not necessarily in the best interest of the city, but we must follow the law, whether we like it or not. The law says we got to do this, we got to do that. So, and this comes back to, you know, we can put in some conditions like we did when I was running, when I was elevated to the mayor, that I wasn't going to be a candidate for mayor. We can actually go back and say, we're going to appoint Joe, Peter, or Paul under the condition that this person is not going to be a regular candidate for that position. And that takes care of what we wanted to do, not to give somebody an advantage. And that's something we can do once we get the relief from the state that says that we can hold the elections within ourselves versus a general election. We can put those conditions in and making sure that the person who's coming in to Ward 1 is a resident of Ward 1, is someone that has some experience in city government, that's going in there for the best interest of the residents of that particular ward for the remainder of the term that Councilor Cruz had. I think it's very clear, but somehow we're confusing these things and making it sound like, you know, we're all of a sudden we decided that, you know, this is something that Councilor Monahan and I decided to do, when we basically are saying we are choiceless. I think by now we're actually getting close to violating that state law violating that charter because Council Cruz has been out of that position now for several weeks. We should have had some sort of a process in place and how to go about replacing it. And I believe this is the best way and the most inexpensive way to go about doing it, assuring that we get the right person in that position. And it should also be someone who has not indicated that he or she pretends or plans on running for the seat in November or in September, as it may be with the primaries here in the city. So that's why I'm saying that this isn't our choice. We got to move forward with this stuff. Either we move forward with this stuff or we're violating state law. And I don't want to, honestly, I don't want to violate state law. Either we decide to go the route of the homeroom petition or we vote for an election. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilors, I live in Ward 1, so I'd like to pass the gavel to Councilor Iannieri for a minute and have a chance to opine here.
That's enough.
Okay, I get it.
Councilor Fowler?
You don't want to spend the $35,000, and I think that's a wise choice, particularly because of COVID. And I have no problem with a home rule petition that says, notwithstanding the provision of any general or special law to the contrary, the city of Brockton shall not be required to hold an election because of safety and health concerns caused by COVID. My problem is, as currently written, you're asking the legislature to give ward councilors the right to appoint someone to represent the people in Ward 1. And it's not just someone that sits here. It's someone that goes to ZBA meetings. It's someone that goes to planning board meetings. It's someone that goes to Conservation Commission meetings or Traffic Commission meetings. You're basically saying you want the authority to appoint the person that should represent Ward 1 in all of those different instances. And I think that's patently wrong. I wouldn't want to do it to a ward councilor in Ward 2 or Ward 7. I don't think the ward councilor in 4 or 3 or 6 or 5 should tell me in Ward 1 as a resident, this is who I think should represent you. I've looked at resumes. Now, the issue of appointing someone who promises not to run again, you've immediately made that person a lame duck. They're accountable to no one. They're not accountable to the voters because they're not going to run again. They're not accountable to the council because you've already appointed them. So what do we have to hold them accountable that they'll actually act in the best interests of Ward 1? You want to appoint a lame duck? Is that what this job is about? We want a pulse and a temperature, and we put them in there for, you know, the remaining 6 months of a term? I mean, I would hope that we're better than that. So as a resident of Ward 1, I would hope that you would either take the time to amend this and ask that we don't have to hold an election, but don't put it through where you think you deserve the power to tell the people in Ward 1 who should represent them. That is just plainly wrong. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
What do I say? No one of these glasses. Councilor
Thompson.
Councilor Thompson, then Councilor Cardoza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just kind of confused about, and again, I wish our legislative counsel was here. I'm confused about what our options are. So, Councilor Rodriguez, you said our option is either special election or home rule petition appoint, right? Then, and then I think, Mr. President, you make a good point where I would want to home rule petition with no appointment and just allow the election to happen, and then have the at-large councilors step into the shoes of that Ward 1 city councilor, and then let an election happen as through normal course, and then that person takes their seat in January. So I'm still confused. I see three options: special election, appointment, or no appointment and let the election play out. Are those our three options? And if they are our three options, then I think maybe we should take a vote on each individual option. So, I mean, that way we can all have every option is on the table. We all take a vote on each option. The one that we all agree upon, that's the one that moves forward.
All right, the chair would say that before you now, you have what has been filed, and that has been moved and seconded, as I understand it. So that is what we're debating. That can be amended. Someone can offer an amendment to that home rule petition to do what that member wants to do, and then you would vote on the amendment, and if it passes, then you would have the home rule petition as amended. I hope I haven't confused you, but
Right.
so you do have options, but right now, the only thing before you is the home rule petition, which has been duly filed, referred to finance. It calls for no election and the authority of the council to appoint someone to represent the people of Ward 1.
But Councilor Rodriguez is saying that's really our only other option. He says that there is no option to allow for no appointment and just to allow for the general election in due course.
I don't think he said that, but I'll let him answer for himself. Okay.
No, what I basically said, Counselor, is that we have two options. Either we hold elections or we petition the court, petition the state. Those are the two options that we have. Now, whatever language we use on the petition is a different story, but we have two options. Either hold the election or petition the state to get some relief from the charter.
And within that petition, we can either seek an appointment or leave the seat open.
Correct. Whatever language we put in there is based on the language that we're asking the state to give us relief from.
And I would ask that we vote on both options and let the will of the council decide whether we should allow for an appointment or allow for the general election to happen in due course.
All right, well, the only thing the chair would say is that now you only have before you what has been filed. If you want to amend that, you have a right to amend it, or you could vote it down unfavorably, but then you have nothing, you can't introduce something here at finance. It has to be introduced at council.
Mr. Chairman, I think there was some additional point here somehow. Maybe I wasn't that clear. What you're saying, Counselor, you're saying vote on the two options. The option is not to hold an election or hold an election when the election time comes. The option is hold an election now or petition the state. It's hold an election now.
Right.
It's not hold an election in September or don't hold an election.
No.
We have to either hold an election now or petition the state to get relief.
Right, petition the state to not require a special election or an appointment, just kind of leave it open until the general election.
But what you're saying is that we can vote on the two options. Right now, we don't have two options. Right now, we have one option.
Can we present a second option today?
No, you can't. You have to go back to the council.
Yeah,
Right now, what you have in front of you is the petition that we submitted for a petition the state to get relief from that.
With the appointment option in it.
Correct.
So can we amend it to remove that appointment option?
You can, and if it's voted favorably here, you would have to vote it again at council level, and then you would have a home rule petition that basically says, Brockton asks that we not be required to hold an election.
Mr. Chair, I believe Councilor Nicastro
She is,
introduced
yes,
it.
I know.
She introduced an amendment. So the amendment's on the table.
I have to withdraw my motion for her to make that, or do I? Because we didn't vote on the motion yet.
Well, it's
Well, I say we take both votes.
easier for her to
It
amend
was
it.
actually my motion. Seconded.
Go ahead, Councilor Nicastro.
And I'm not with
Through you to everyone. I wanted there to be discussion, which is why I did not introduce an amendment. Plus, we already have a motion that's been seconded, so that would have to be withdrawn to be able to make a motion to amend it. What I'm looking at the second page of what's in front of us, and what I would suggest would be that we would end the sentence where the phrase says, "The vacancy shall not be filled by a special municipal election." I'd just put a period.
Isn't that
there.
an amendment?
You can do that as an amendment, Council.
Yes, I'm just saying, that's what I would have. So I would let a home rule petition go forward, saying that we don't have to have a special election But that's all it would say.
Period.
That is
All
an
right, so are
amendment.
you, so of the motion that's on the floor, are you offering an amendment that would strike the language requiring an appointment, or asking for authority to appoint someone to a vacancy?
Yes.
Second.
That's what I said.
All right, does everyone understand that?
On that motion,
Council's not here to this.
Councilors, Councilor Castro has offered an amendment to this motion. If it passes here favorably, it would have to be adopted at council on Monday evening. But her amendment is to strike language in the home rule petition that requires or requests authority for us to appoint someone to the vacant Ward 1 position. It would simply ask that we not be required to hold an election.
And then I guess my question then becomes, is that lawful? Is the state going to allow for that? And that's why I wish our legislative council, because everybody always said either special election or appointment. To not allow for an appointment, I'm just wondering, and I wish our expert was here to say, would the state sign off on that?
I can't, the chair could not speak as to what the legislature would or would not do. I will simply say that in Boston, they did allow them some leeway not to hold a special election. I think given Brockton's history of not having a lot of excess revenue sitting around, and with COVID, that they would probably look favorably now, particularly since we're into April, almost May, of allowing us to negate the need for an election, but there obviously is no guarantee. And I don't think legislative council could tell us with any degree of certainty what the legislature might or may not do.
Understood.
Mr. Chair,
Everyone
I've been trying to
finish
say
over here.
something for a
Councilor Carvalho.
while. So she introduced an amendment which we can vote down tonight, and we can vote on this tonight. The other thing that I will say as far as the appointment and not, this body not making that decision, again, I will repeat myself, we made that decision when we voted for the at-large counselor to replace Mr. Rodriguez. We decided for the constituents, for the residents in Brockton, that Mr. John McGarry would be the person best suited to represent them and not Mr. Ollie J. Spears. So let's just remember that. So when we're talking about this body, making a decision for the residents of this city, let's remember that we did that in the past. But I think that there's an amendment on the table and we can vote no on it. I don't know.
Mr. Chair,
Councilor Monahan, on the amendment now.
on the amendment, well, first of all, I haven't withdrawn my,
No, you don't have to withdraw it. She
I
can
thought I had to
amend your
withdraw it for her to
motion.
make an amendment.
She can amend your motion, so.
Okay. I amend the amendment.
Okay,
Oh, go ahead.
so does
Go
everyone
ahead, I'll say it.
understand the amendment? This will be on whether to recommend favorably the amendment.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Councilor.
Again, we're always here professing how we're here in the best interest of the community. I do not see the state of Massachusetts allowing a community relief from their charter to say, don't hold an election. I don't see it happening. What's going to happen is that the state's going to come back and say, no, this is denied, and then we're forced to hold an election. Now, mind you, it might even be closer to September, October, and now we're going to be forced to hold 3 elections because we have to hold the special election by law and the other 2, the primaries and the regular general election that we have coming up this year. So we're playing with fire here by just semantics in the sense of asking the state to give us leverage, give us relief from the charter, but for us not to hold an election. I think we're playing with fire, and it's going to end up costing us, be more costly down the road when we are actually confusing voters in Ward 1, whether or not they're voting for a special election, they're voting for the primary elections, or they're voting for the general election, but not including the person. I think we're creating a real situation here for the folks in that ward, and I don't think it's something that we should take a chance with. Either decide we're going to hold an election and foot the bill, or we're going to go by what all these other communities do, asking for relief so that they can find the easiest path to basically achieve what they need to achieve. But I'm not going to sit here and support the fact that we're going to take a chance by sending something down the road that if I was sitting up there, I would definitely not give you that relief, because that opens up a can of worms that you might not be able to close. Because a community can come down the road and say, you know what, we don't want to hold elections this year, so give us relief so that we don't have election period. And guess what? There will be some history on that particular thing, and I don't think the state's going to go along with that. And that's something that I'm not gonna pull back my motion, and I'm going to continue to go with that, because it's either we put up or we shut up. And I'm not willing to shut up, because this is not something that's going to be beneficial to taxpayers in this community. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Counselor, the chair would simply say to you that when the law was passed requiring an election, if a vacancy in a ward council position was for greater than 6 months, that was after it went through legislative hearings. That was after the legislature carefully examined that particular issue, and they voted to enact that law, which applies throughout the state. So there's absolutely no guarantee they're going to say, well, gee, in Brockton, we're going to give the remaining councilors the right to appoint someone. There's absolutely no guarantee. There's no one in this room tonight that knows what that legislature will do. We are asking them for something that they've basically already ruled on. They've said you're going to hold an election if you've got more than 6 months. There were 9 months left in Councilor Cruz's term. And we sat around and we said, well, it's too much money. Well, we can't get it done.
They did it for Boston, Mr. President.
And the problem is, I don't know what the legislature will do. And I'll refer to my remarks, I don't think ward councilors should tell the residents of another ward, this is who we think should represent you.
Mr. Chairman, I think I should call a vote, and we vote whichever direction we want to go in, and let the chips fall where they may.
All right.
Just,
Would you
I
allow
guess one last
Counselor
question,
Thompson
and
to,
Counselor, through you, Mr. President, to Counselor Rodriguez, would you know that if we do vote for appointment, when do we have to appoint? I mean, is there any possible way to appoint the winner of the election? I mean, so is that, do we have, if we do appoint, what's the time frame that we have to appoint? Is that up to us?
Counsel, we're in uncharted territory because the legislature passed a law. We now don't like that law, or there is a motion here because we don't like that law. How they treat our home rule petition, I do not know. And I don't think anyone can predict how that will be handled. But if the question has been called,
yes,
we have an amendment offered by Councilor Nicastro. Was that seconded?
Second.
That was seconded by Councilor Lally. That amendment would amend what is before you so that you have a proposed home rule petition that would call for Brockton to be relieved of the obligation to hold an election, but it would not seek authority for councilors to be able to appoint a councilor for Ward 1. So do we understand what we're voting on? So would the clerk call the roll on the amendment?
Cardozo?
No.
Ianieri?
I don't know, I'm confused. I guess I'll go with no.
Farwell?
Yes.
Lally?
Yes.
Mendez?
Yes.
Monahan?
No.
Nicastro?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
No.
Thompson?
Yes.
5 in the affirmative and 4 in the opposition.
All right, so now what you have before you is an amended home rule petition. Again, the amendment will have to be approved at the council level. So now the issue is on the home rule petition as amended. Is there any further debate, discussion?
I would
Councilor
just,
Cardozo.
Mr. Chair, I don't think it's legal. I think we're making a mistake here. So if that's the case, I would move for us to postpone it until our legal counsel's here, because from what I'm hearing from Councilor Rodriguez, our charter states that we can't leave this seat open. So I don't know if we can vote on this. Our charter states we either have a special election, we have to have a special election. I don't think we can leave this seat open.
The chair would say, though, what you're voting on tonight is asking the legislature for permission not to follow that law. So you wouldn't be violating it if they approve it.
I think we can say the same thing about the will of Ward 1. So we're saying to them that, no, you don't deserve to have someone represent you. We're saying, we're contradicting ourselves, where we're saying we don't want to be the one to tell you who should represent you, but we're the ones saying that you don't deserve representation. That makes no sense. I don't feel comfortable that we're doing the right thing here. That is so silly. It was okay when we said to the entire public that we were going to appoint a council at large, but it's not okay for Ward 1 for us to tell them who, I mean, the whole thing just doesn't make sense to me.
Councilor,
We're contradicting ourselves. So.
Again, we're talking about two entirely different positions, a ward councilor and a councilor at large. But Councilor Ian Erie?
Just for one thing, I want to get straight in my head, and that's unusual for someone who's been on the ballot for 40 years, but I'm a little confused here. I think if we're having a special election, the special election is being held, and you're having a primary, and they say that's June, July, and then you have the election, so okay, that's August. So now, that seat is still up for election. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes. What sense is that? I don't get an answer.
Well, I think that's the point of going with the home rule petition, is to forego the special election, which then bumps up against a general election.
But it's still, you said the seat's still up for election.
Well,
Correct.
Chairman?
Has to be. You know what I'm saying? It's still up under the, am I right, Mr. Chairman?
Your question is, what is the sense of holding an election so close to an upcoming election?
Yeah, because that person is still going to be on the ballot for September, November, as much as they've just been on the ballot in July and August.
They could be.
No,
That's
not could be. They would be if I can remember. And I don't want to shout out to the audience, but I can remember. I think when Mike Brady took over the position in Ward 2 to be a councilor at that time, that's how it happened, and he was on the ballot again. They're on a ballot twice. You see what I'm saying?
Right. So
Special in general.
So to bring this to some type of closure, councilors, the issue originally was the cost, and then the issue was appointing someone to replace the councilor who has departed. We now have an amended home rule petition in front of us that would ask the legislature to allow Brockton not to hold an election because of financial or COVID reasons. That is what is before you. Now, someone can move to postpone. If that gets a vote, it's postponed. Or you can go forward and you can vote, and if this passes, it goes back to the full council to be voted upon. If it passes favorably or unfavorably, someone could switch their vote, but it's the will of the body. So if you're, Councilor Thompson,
But we will, again, have an opportunity to speak to Legislative Council next week on this very issue, and at that time, if we learn different facts, we can make another amendment, correct?
when it goes back to council, you can make an amendment, you can approve it, or you can send it back to another committee.
Okay.
You have more options at council. So, all right, so are we ready to proceed?
Nope.
Councilor Lally, I'm sorry, the reflection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to say that Councilor Thompson, I believe you're absolutely right, that this, we get an opinion from our legislative council next week. Whether we postpone it or not, they're going to be at the council meeting. So we might as well vote on this now. No permanent, if councilors do not like the amendment that was passed by majority in this council tonight, they have a week to lobby the councilors who voted in favor to change their votes, because we have to vote on this amendment again next week. This is, the conversation of an election is past. This body has decided that we will appeal the state instead. Now we are just discussing the particulars of the appeal. We are not, the amendment says that we are not going to ask to appoint a counselor, we are just going to ask to forego the election. We will be voting on this amendment again, and we will be doing it in the presence of our council's attorney. So we can ask Attorney Resnick what she thinks. If Attorney Resnick gives information that changes how we acted today and makes the amendment look like a bad idea, we vote against the amendment, we change the amendment, we do something different. But it behooves us to move this forward now, because that is how we're going to get a faster answer from the council's attorney. For those concerned that we're running close to the deadline when it comes to, you know, when we would have to have an election if we haven't gotten state permission, that shaves a week off of our time, really 2. So it's, I believe, in this body's best interest, whether we are in favor or opposed to this amendment, to move forward tonight, recommend this favorably, and send it to the full council, where we will have, again, the option to vote on the amendment. We don't have to vote the same way on the amendment, but we will have the option to vote on the amendment again after receiving advice from our legal counsel, who we can bring up in question. So postponement really does nothing more than add on 2 weeks to a situation that some of my colleagues have expressed their concern over how long we're taking. So I would ask that we move forward and motion on, move this favorably right now. We cannot make that motion as of yet, but that's what I would ask my colleagues to do.
After hearing all this, maybe the legislature was smart in the first place when they passed a law prescribing how these things would be handled. But in any event, would the clerk please call the roll? This is on the whole petition as amended.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Councilor Rodriguez.
As the sponsor of the resolution, I feel that it basically waters down what we tried to do with this particular order. Therefore, what I'd like to do is remove my sponsorship, and I hope Council Monahan will do the same thing, and then have this order basically have no support, because I do not see the case of a situation where the state is going to give us permission not to hold, to first of all give us a relief from the charter, and second, for us not to hold an election. Mr. Chairman, you made it very clear that we, the 10 of us that are left here, should not decide who should represent Ward 1. With all due respect, we do that all the time. This is a representative form of government. We represent the people all the time. We did it when Mayor Carpenter passed. We appointed somebody to assume that role. We did it when I moved to the mayor's seat for somebody to assume that role. We do it all the time. We do it with their tax dollars. We do it with every single thing. We are a form of government that is a representative form of government. Therefore, it makes no difference who's deciding whether or not I could be living in Ward 2 and I move to Ward 1, just, you know, and I vote on the election. I'm not vested in Ward 1, but that's just the way things go. We are a representative form of government. The people put us here, especially the 4 at-larges that are here. They put us here to represent them. We don't have town meetings. We have council meetings to speak on behalf of those that elected us to be here. Therefore, if we insist on sending this order to the state, minus the caveat that we basically appoint the person to hold that seat over for the next 5 months, 6 months, or whatever that may be, then I will remove my my sponsorship of that of this order, in hopes that Council Monahan does the same thing, and then basically kind of kill the whole thing, and then we put ourselves in a situation where I am not exactly sure, but I know we have quite a few individuals who are not friends of this council who can actually call us very soon as to whether or not we're violating state law or not, by not either putting in a relief through the state or basically hold an election for Ward 1. So we'll find that out real soon. So that's what I like to do as far as this body is concerned. Thank you, Mr.
And the chair would say to you, Councilor Rodriguez, if the legislature wanted city councils to have the authority to appoint ward councilors, I believe they would have granted it to us. And they did not do that. So would
This
the
was
clerk
also
please call
written
the
back
roll?
in 1800s or something, before we were a city.
Hey, thank you. I don't know about how we withdraw our sponsorship. I guess we could, but I thought we talked about this earlier when we wanted to move forward with this home rule petition. And I thought it was kind of clear that what we were going to do. And this states what we wanted to do. And then we've also voted, as I recall, when the Ward 6 school committee person passed away, unfortunately. I think all of us in the council voted for the Ward 6's school committee person. I think we voted, we didn't?
That was in the city charter, you're correct.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, our judgment for other wards, I mean, for representation, in my mind, I don't think, I mean, if we can't be trusted to make a decision on a good representative for Ward 1, we shouldn't be elected officials. Why are we here? So I think that what we had put forward was the simplest way to get it done quickly and fairly and to move forward. Now it's just going to be a big mess, to my opinion. I can see this going back next week now. And now we're going to try to figure out what amendment we want to do, and we want to change it around. What do we want to do? I just think we created a big mess with this. We do have to go forward one way or another, though. Councilor Rodriguez, I understand what you're saying, but even as amended, it's going to be to go to home rule petition, and I think next week, hopefully we can fight and get what we want and what we think is right and fair. I'd vote down this amendment, and then I'd put back in what we'd have here. But I think we're going to have to vote in favor of it just so we can get to that point, because time's wasted. I don't see, by pulling our sponsorship of it, where that's going to be any good, because we're going to be just wasting more time. So I think hopefully we pass it to the council, and at that time, try to change it so that, or we'll come up with whatever we need to do before we send it in. So, I don't know. Thank you.
Mr. Councilor
Councilor Ianieri, followed by Councilor Thompson.
I'm just going to be quick, and I'm not trying to be rude, but I just want to straighten away what the council did mention about when Kevin Nolan passed away, because it's very clear in my head, because he died on Father's Day of June of 2003. I was still on the school committee. Jack Eunice then let that process, because we already had 6 months. We allowed the candidates to have their normal election, and what we did is when that person won the election, and his name escapes me, God bless him, he passed away, but when that election was over with, we appointed him, but he also took Inauguration Day as being sworn in at the same time. We appointed him to sit in the seat for learning purposes, and that's how that was done at that particular time. Council Monahan wasn't here, because I wasn't even here. I was still across the street. But I just wanted to clarify that in my mind. That's how that worked.
No, I'm talking about the Ward 6 guy.
Said Mr. Nolan.
No, I didn't say Nolan. I said the Ward 6, oh my God, it's bad.
Mr. Daley?
Healy.
Healy.
Oh, Mr. Healy was a different, that was a different.
Yeah,
That's
what I'm talking about.
He was appointed, that's right,
All
Mr. Healy, yeah.
Let's try to move this along. Councilor Thompson.
Yeah, and I'll be quick, Mr. Chair. This is the first time this matter has come to me, so I'm humble enough to know that sometimes I don't always have the right answer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask that the Ward 1 residents reach out to me. Let me know. Do you want to have an appointment, or do you want to just forego the election and let the general election pick your representative? I'm always willing to listen and to try to understand your concerns. So I'm asking Ward 1 residents, reach out, let us know, and I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Nicastro.
Thank you. Through you to Councilor Thompson, it would actually be the preliminary election in September, followed by the general in November. Okay, that's how it would be decided. And papers can be pulled for the preliminary election beginning at the beginning of May, so it is right around the corner that we'll be seeing candidates stepping forward. I think we have to advance this tonight. Clearly, it needs some more work. We're at a disadvantage because our legislative counsel is not here. But this is not a done deal. We know that we've been reassured that she'll be with us next week. We can ask her questions and explore all the ramifications. We can also write to her between now and then to kind of get an idea of where she's at with things. And I'd just like to say I've been sitting here reflecting on the charter and why is it different for counselors at large versus for ward counselors when there's a vacancy. And I think it's because it's okay for the council made up of 7 wards and 4 counselors at large. It's okay for the remaining members to vote for a counselor at large because we all represent the city that votes for counselors at large. I think that's why it's distinguished the way that it is. But none of us represent, we're not in the respective wards for the most part. You and I are together, Councilor Rodriguez, but no one else is in Ward 4 as an example. I think that's why it's different. I think it's okay for the entire council to appoint someone for the remaining term of a counselor at large's seat, but not for a ward counselor. And I think that's the distinguishing feature that we're all going back and forth about.
But I don't think it's okay to leave it open.
Counselor, please.
We have to go through him. But
Yeah.
I think we advance it and we figure it out. Thank you.
Call for a vote.
Clerk, please call the roll. On the amendment, the order is amended.
Cardozo.
No.
Ianary.
No.
Farwell.
Yes.
Lally.
Yes.
Mendez.
Yes.
Monahan.
Yes.
Nacastro.
Yes?
Rodriguez.
No.
Thompson.
Yes.
6 in the affirmative.
Recommended favorably to the full city council. Item number 11,
As amended.
as amended.
Resolved to invite the city clerk for the city of Brockton to appear before a committee of the council as to the workings of the city clerk's office. Invited, City Clerk Anthony J. Zioli.
Councilors, let me, before the clerk comes up here, let me be very clear that this is not a grievance session. I think sometimes we take something that's on the agenda and then we have a laundry list of everything that's bothered us in the past. And this is to learn about what does the city clerk do. I'm convinced some people have no idea the extent to which the city clerk has an effect on city government. If there are issues that want to be advanced, that ad hoc committee is the perfect place to be able to sit down and evaluate what we have, what we'd like to have, and how do we get there. So this is not a grievance session. Again, I want to make that very clear. Mr. Clerk, it's been a long night, but welcome.
Well, good evening.
Good evening.
I hope everybody feels wide awake, willing to listen. The communication I received was that my presence was requested to come up here to discuss the workings of the city clerk's office. However, listening to some of the conversations that went on here, I was about ready to ask Chief Gomes to borrow his bulletproof vest, his riot helmet, and his baton. But enough for comedy. Let's get on to an issue I'd like to clear up here, if I may. Councilor Rodriguez, it seems that you and I go head-to-head for some reason all the time. Why, I don't know. But you stated that you sent a request into my office for a citation and that nothing has taken place on that thing. And then you said that even up until the time of this meeting, you hadn't received anything. So one would assume that you expect me to keep somebody here 5 or 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night to answer you. That's number one, but let's not
Mr.
even get
Chairman,
into that.
Mr. Chairman,
First of all,
you said we're not gonna air grievances.
Yes.
So
I think
are we
I
gonna
have
open it up with some grievances? Is that how it goes?
No, I think he was simply responding to your earlier comment.
Okay, so I'm a
and
liar
clarifying.
because I can't read what it says on this thing, that I have not received a single note saying, I got your email. That's all I was saying.
I'm about to give the counselor the reason why he hasn't received anything. So I have to start somewhere. And that is, I'm giving the conversation that I listened to here to lead into it. Here's what took place. First of all, you sent the request to a staff member, Robin, not to me. That's number one. You check your email. Not that that matters, because they come to me when there's a problem or when something should be taken care of. Number two, I wish you'd review your email, and you will find out it's garbled. We don't really know what you wanted us to put in that citation.
I don't think we're here for this.
And I am willing to give,
Counselor, Let
give
him-
everybody a copy of that email. It's no great thing. We're going to take care of it. As a
It must
matter
be
of
my
fact,
upbringing,
in
sir.
his email, he stated that he needed it for tomorrow. Robin came to me and said, I have a problem here. She showed it to me, and I said, well, since it's not an emergency nature, Robin, first thing in the morning, call the counselor, tell him what the problem is, and have him give you what he wants in that citation, draft it, call him, and let him know he can pick it up within 5 or 10 minutes of your phone call. That's the start and the end of it. I didn't think it was something to be brought up that it was catastrophic, okay? That's my answer to that. I have nothing more to say in it, but just to answer what took place, okay? I hope that's satisfactory. I don't take it as an issue. I don't take it personally, okay? So that's the reason for it. Tomorrow, he will pick up that citation without a problem, okay? The other thing is that at one time or another, we have given all of you people blank citations, so that in the case of an emergency, you could use that citation, such on a weekend, or what happens, that you find out there's a special thing that's come up, and that you want to take care of it, and the hall is closed, or we're not functioning. That's another avenue. The other thing is, when I came here 30 years ago, this council did not have a form of citation. It didn't really have anything that you could even call to a proclamation. So I developed that citation through my experience in the State House. It worked very effectively. I think it's not because I instituted it, but I think it's a great thing to show the public that the council does appreciate what they do, or where they participate as volunteers, or whatever the case might be. So I'm all for citations, okay? I think if you want to know what the city clerk's office does, there's so much going there. I'll give you an example of some of the things that we do, and then I would suggest that probably we become very candid on this, and that you zero in on what you really would like to know, you know? I think that might be the proper way to handle it, and I think it may save a lot of time and effort here. So the city clerk, and as you know, when you go for the budget, at the start of the budget, there is a mission statement for each department. That department is also building, health, whatever, and city clerk. So at the start of the budget, you have the mission statement of the city clerk. And it talks about service activities. We issue certified copies of births, marriages, and deaths when needed. We issue licenses for hunting, fishing, dogs, entertainment, and various other licenses, some of which now are done through the mayor's office and the
1227.
Election Commission, I'm sorry. We process all marriage intentions applied for in the city of Brockton. We handle all corrections of any records in the custody of the city registrar. And the mission is the city clerk has custody of all birth, deaths, and marriage records pertaining to Brockton. The city clerk's office is designed to promptly and accurately respond to the public's demand for certified records. Our general responsibilities are that the functions and responsibilities of the position of the city clerk, as provided for in the Massachusetts General Law and revised ordinances of the City of Brockton, as follows. The city clerk will organize government. He organizes and presides in inauguration and organization of city government, administers oath of office to all elected and appointed city officials. The city council, he attends all meetings, prepares the agenda, reviews council submissions, prepares and certifies council records, documents, maps, and etc., institutes and sets up lawful procedures and timetables for passage of all message by city council, including zoning amendments, general ordinances, and loan orders. He also works with the Register of Vital Stats. We receive, record, and maintain custody of all the births and deaths and marriages, and we consider evidence and make decisions as to allowing amendments by law or rejection of an amendment. We process licenses. We process properly prepared and conforming licenses and license renewals through the City Council with issuance of letters of rejection. Licenses include but are not limited to secondhand articles, junk, bowling alleys, pool tables, bazaars, hunting, fishing, dog, signs over public ways, gasoline stations, many others, and motor vehicle repairs, as you all know. Most require annual renewals. Many require public hearings set up and published by the city clerk with legal notification. He's the custodian of the records, custodian of all city records as provided by law, and records for which no provisions has been made by law. These include maintaining records of appointments of all municipal boards and commissions, rules and regulations of boards and commissions, city deeds, lease agreements, all city contracts, oath of office is administered to all department heads, appointed and elected officials, with certification of each officer's authority to act. By state law, provides copies of conflict of interest, statutes of open meeting law. He's responsible for maintaining all city general zoning ordinances, printing, editing, regularly supplementing, and periodically redefining the same for distribution to all department, government agencies, and the general public. We receive and under claims and summonses. We receive, index, and process all claims, legal services, and summonses against the city of Brockton. Certification of all documents and records for court appearances. We do file and index and maintain legal records of personal property and mortgages under the Uniform Commercial Code of Massachusetts. That has been changed to an extent. We maintain up-to-date index for ready references by attorneys, banks, mortgages, and loan companies, and maintain records of amendments, continuations, terminations, federal and state tax liens. Certified copies of the above documents are provided. By law, the city clerk is the keeper of the city seal, and the staff shall affix that city seal to all deeds and legal documents for the mayor and other officers of the city to which the city seal is required. The city clerk is also the clerk of the municipal corporation. Streets, he records all orders laying out, altering, widening, discontinuing any streets, meeting all legal requirements for preparing public hearings and adoptions of orders by the city council. Coordinate the superintendent of engineering for recording at the registry of deeds all city council orders and plans of land taken, temporary or permanent easements, with legal certified mail to all affected property owners and parties of interest in the property, such as banks and mortgage holders. Certified mail notification to same and all betterment assessments ensures compliance with legal time frames attached to recorded and certified mailing, and also to newspaper publications of public hearing. We have a collection of over $150,000 in fees for certified documents, licenses, ordnance, maps, public records, etc. Fees are primarily set by the state statute and ordinances at typically low rates. The bonding of the city clerk is required by the Department of Revenue. We receive, index, and record notice of meetings of municipal boards and commissions posted in accordance with the public meeting law, rules, decisions, and records of proceedings of the Zoning Board of Appeals and the Planning Board, appeal for decisions from the building inspector, also transmit copies to other departments. Legal action, transmit copies as required. Planning Board decisions regarding subdivision control, certify such action and non-action. Processing charter amendments and other acts and deeds in relation to, receive, examine, file, and monitor political expenses statements from candidates and political committees for public office and enforcement and laws relative thereto. That has changed some. And report to the Attorney General candidates who do not file or who file reports are not in conformance with the law. That has changed and gone to the Elections Commission. We take care of the going out of business or the closing of out sales and bonds. We do the business certificates filed by persons operating a business under a name other than that of their own. We do certificates of registration in various fields of medicine. We notify federal and state agencies of any changes of memberships of the Brockton Housing Authority or the Brockton Redevelopment Authority. We have a record of streetlights and pole locations and any changes or amendments thereto throughout the city. We file federal and state tax claims and all filing statements, petitions, etc. under the Conflict of Interest Law. We are involved in a certification of the elections. We make certain that through our recordings of deaths that these people are properly removed from the election sheets or voting sheets. Strike that. Okay, and that is part that we work with what would have been the Register of Voters, but it's now your election commissions. We also work with the census up until this past year or year and a half. Not to mention, what we do is the city, with the city council as the clerk to the council. We also handle the cemetery deeds, the plot openings, the certification of the deaths through the funeral parlors. There are many, many other things. This is what I bring to you now. This is what the city clerk does, besides what the council wants of the city clerk. I do this with a personnel of 5 people. For the most part, 4. And we have one that has been out for a year.
Mr. Clerk, just, is the $150,000 in fees, is that annualized? That's the annual?
That is an old figure. My up-to-date figure is somewhere right now about $280,000. And that figure, understand, comes at, like, as they say it, $24 a push, okay? So you figure out how many certified copies that we do. Often when the hall is not closed, you find a line in front of our office all the time. It's as though we're running some kind of a sale. The office is probably, if not the busiest, one of the busiest offices in the hall. And I'm not trying to take away anything from the other departments because they all work very hard. But we are one of the busiest, okay? We are working now at not 40% in the hall here, as the mayor said we could do. My full staff is in here every day.
All right.
If anybody has any doubts about that, the cash receipts will show that we're here daily.
Councilor Monahan filed this, so you have, if you have the floor first. If not, I'll go to...
I brought Tony in because there were questions of what the department does, and people were wondering about that on the council also, so I just brought him before us to inform us. So we have councilors here that have to ask some questions.
All right. Councilor Cardozo and then Rodriguez.
Good evening, Mr. Clerk.
Yes.
And I want to thank you for my citations, because I think they were all fine and done in a timely manner. And, you know, for your assistance with some of the resolutions that I filed and, you know, the guidance that you provided me, I appreciate that. I want to remind folks at home, and maybe you can speak to this, that on the website, there's a list of different things that the clerk department does, correct? Is that a new list, or?
Sorry, would you repeat that again? I'm picking up a drone here.
So the list of items that go through your department are on our website, correct? Okay, because I saw some of the things that you do in that department, just for folks at home to know that if they didn't understand your presentation tonight or they missed something, that there is. If there isn't, if you wouldn't mind taking a look and updating or having someone update that. Okay, and then, you know, this is a very busy department, like you mentioned, so my only concern is I wish that you would have appointed someone for an assistant sooner. That might have alleviated a lot of the issues that we had as far as accessing that department to help the council.
I think everyone was in favor.
In answer to that, they had intended to appoint somebody, so we had the 19
You may have to be near the microphone, Mr. Clerk.
I don't think that you were involved, but maybe you were. But the council wanted to set up a separate department for the council. And at that time, it was agreeable with the mayor to try to do this. It wasn't going to require any additional funding because there was money in the budget to do it. And we were looking for a space to put this department. For those people that were involved, they should remember this. And so consequently, I was getting ready to retire at that time too, but I said that I put my retirement off, figuring that the person taking my place should be involved with that, setting that office up and doing whatever it is, okay? So that's another reason why this appointment wasn't made sooner. So my retirement now is, I've made that decision. I had intended to stay longer, but I've made a decision that I was going to leave about 6 months or a year ago. And I held off trying to get this department so that we could get someone in, okay?
Yeah. So in hindsight, would you say you should have maybe appointed someone sooner?
No, I do not, because let me say this to you, that it would have been nice to get someone in sooner. I did ask people, okay? I didn't do a world search, and the ordinances do not require me to do that. But I did talk to several people that I felt were competent to do this, and I wasn't received very well with it. They didn't have the interest in it. They told me that, number one, they didn't feel that the pay was enough, the salary was enough. They told me that to come in and be a resident, if they're not a resident of the city of Brockton, for a short term of 3 years, and not knowing what's going to happen after that 3 years, that they didn't want to take that risk.
Well, I hope we learn from this, because given that everybody on this council is saying how busy the clerk's office is, it's an important role that we do something to make sure that it's staffed properly to be able to service not only the community but this body. So
I'm all for that, but I have worked that position for several years now with no help, and the reason it was given up or never an appointment made is that we were talking about layoffs, and my deal was that I would not put the assistant clerk on to save the workers in my office so that my staff would not be less than it is right now. I think you heard earlier that the staff had great numbers at one time, and now we're down to a quarter of that. We've been interviewing now to put 3 people on because we have the funding for it, and we have 3 people that are leaving, okay? So, yeah, could you get a whole bunch of people in there? Sure. But, you know, that's nice to talk about it now. But, you know, let's be honest, too. What complaints have you had about the city clerk's office running the way it has been? You know, I haven't heard anything. I've been reappointed 10 times. I've worked with 115 different councilors, over 6 mayors. And tonight, this particular council decides that they should make some changes within the structure of the clerk's office, and I don't find that a problem at all. Fine to do it. But it has been functioning properly. And as I said, again, the money that was saved, maybe it's not important right now, but by not having an assistant clerk for over 10 or 11 years, I've saved the city over $7 million in pay. Not to mention the benefits that would go with it, okay? I've done the same with your legislative council to this point. Here, you're working with an outside firm, okay? And that way there, you're not paying any sick time, you're not paying health, you're not paying vacation, you're not, you know. So there are advantages to doing that, okay, if the coverage is there. So now the sad part about this, if there is a sadness, is that we have a limited time to get someone in. This is why I went to Councilor Cruz and asked him, because I don't think this is the time for learning to take a candidate in a learning position. You need somebody that certainly understands a good part of what goes on in council and in the clerk's office. And this is why I went to Councilor Cruz. The other people I went to did have some of that background as well. And he said he would accept, but there was a question as to whether or not he could. Okay, and through the Legislative Council, I believe he inquired of the Ethics Commission, and they come back saying that he could take this particular position and fill it within a day or 30 days or whatever, because the 6-month rule that everybody seems to cling on to does not apply to an assistant clerk or a comment. As long as that appointment does not come from the body in which he served, he or she can fill that position. And that's what the Ethics Commission came back. Now, the clerk's position is something different because the council makes that appointment, so that there is standard requirement of 6 months, which would stand, okay? And the council makes that appointment. The clerk's appointment for the assistant clerk is in the charter. The clerk's appointment for the legislative council is by ordinance. So that can be changed without going into a charter change, okay? If the council feels in their wisdom that they should change this thing, fine. You know, then you should do it, and you have the authority to do so. I say this to you now, 60 days or so, I'm not going to be here. So it isn't going to affect me. So I don't have a personal feeling about this as such as what are you trying to do to me, what's going on. I do have the feel that I certainly want to see the city go on and do good things, as I want to see the council do good things. And any aid that the council feels that they should have, I think that certainly it should be considered. And I don't have to tell you people what your jobs are like. You know what, you're probably making 8 or 9 cents an hour for the time that you put in. You know, and you're a part-time council, my opinion, for what it's worth, probably should be full-time. I don't know, for what you do. And your salary should be increased. Not my position. That's something that you people do. I do what you tell me to do. And that's the best that, and how I can explain it. I hope I've made it clear. I think that those people that have dealt with me in the past and in the present find that I've never refused to do anything that I could to help any type of situation they have. I've tried to respond as soon as I could. I've tried to make you aware of there are problems in your area that people have called me rather than call you. We have taken care of some of those problems that I'm not going to call you at work or wait till a meeting when I can call up the building superintendent, or I can call up the DPW commission and tell them that, we have a complaint in Ward 1, 2, 7, or 8, and do this, And then we'll call back that person that made that complaint and tell them it's been taken care of, and many, many times we get a thank you for it. So, I don't know what it is to say to you, but the clerk's office.
Thank you for your response. I'm all set, Mr.
Anyone else?
Over here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilor Rodriguez?
Mr. Chairman, you began by saying that this wasn't going to be a place to air grievances. And I wasn't going to say boo, Mr. Clerk. I wasn't going to say anything. But you proceeded by insulting me. You proceeded by insulting me. Let me just, I know that it's, I came to this country as a teenager, perhaps. The what? Perhaps it's the fact that I have a simple college degree, a graduate from Brockton High School. Maybe my education level is not as high as yours, and you might get confused with whatever I say. Well, you said and I sent a message that was all gobbled up, basically. I think that's the, no, hold on. You had your speech. I earned this seat. So I'm here to speak when I'm spoken to. I wasn't going to say boo because I wasn't going to air anything, but you brought it up. Yes, I did. Okay, so this is the email that I sent to your office today, and I will actually forward this to the rest of the council so that they see this. It's addressed to Robin, the clerk of the city council, which is you, the city clerk of the city of Brockton, which is you. Yes? And it began this way. I know it's all gobbled up and you have a problem understanding even my written email, never mind the way I speak. But it says this: Hola, I need a council citation for Brenda Rodriguez, stating something like, for your tireless work in pro of the workers and the residents of the city of Champion. I will need this for tomorrow, if possible. Many thanks, Moses. What's so gobbled up about this?
Well, let me tell you something. That's not the one that I have.
This is the one I sent.
No, because you put in there something about, do something with Paul, P-O-L.
The what? Yeah. Where did you get that from? This is the email I sent at 12:37 today.
I don't know what you have there, Counselor, but let me tell you this.
Oh, I know that it must be the line side of things.
What is sitting on Robin's desk.
Well, I suggest that you go check and see what this email is.
And what I will do is I will email that to
Please do.
councilors.
Please do.
And if there's something wrong with your message or the one we received, maybe we can iron it out.
No, there is no such thing as ironing it out, because you came out here and you said that I submitted an email. I speak 4 different languages, Mr. Clerk.
Counselor.
My thing here wasn't.
Mr. President,
why don't
you are now ticking me off because he came in here, you made a statement that says we're not going to air our grievances. And I sat back and I wasn't going to say anything.
Counsel, would you suspend for a minute? You first brought up an issue where you criticized the clerk's office. He does not have his staff here to answer who received what email, when they received it, or even when they read it. So how can he possibly respond intelligently to something that I admit you probably sent? Now, if we're going to have the clerk come in and answer for failures in that office, then he ought to be able to have the time to research.
Not in an insulting way, Mr. President, by saying that it's gobbled up in a message that he did not understand, because I just clearly read what I just said to him. And this isn't the first time that Mr. Clerk has come to this body and basically have insulted me and insulted Jeff Thompson as well. It happened last time during budget hearings, and it continues to happen, that you cannot talk to the holiness on the second floor because you're not supposed to say anything. You know, and that's why I keep questioning whether or not the clerk is the clerk of the council, and if that's not the case, we need to get a clerk for the council.
Then what I would say is, if you or Councilor Thompson or anyone else feels insulted, then sit down with the clerk.
I am not
let him-
going to sit down with the clerk. It happened here on the airwaves,
Okay, well-
and this is where it goes back. And I'm not done yet, Mr. President.
Well, we're going to get done quickly, or we'll adjourn.
I think you need to remind us to a point, because I actually had it here. I guess it all depends who gets insulted in this body. Is that what it is? It
no.
all depends who gets insulted, who gets their whatever in a certain way, because it's perfectly fine for the clerk to come here and insult a member of this body by saying that they basically it's all gobbled up and whatever message that you send, it's all gobbled up. That to me is an insult, and I cannot stand here and put up with this kind of stuff.
Counselor, I would remind you, you started this ball rolling by initially raising the issue of not getting a citation
To
in a
the
timely
incoming assistant clerk in terms of saying, look, I hope that we've got better communications when he assumes that position, because I sent out an email, and all I wanted to say from an email is to say, no, I can't do it, I received it, or I'll get it to you next week, or something, some sort of a response. That's all I was asking for. And that's what I was addressing it to the incoming assistant city clerk.
All right, and
So that this relationship
my
can get
point-
better in a better tone, because this is a little ridiculous. And I'm glad, I can't wait for 60 days. I'm glad and I'm tired of this.
God bless you. God bless you, Counselor. Let me say this, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Briefly,
When
because
when
it
when
really,
used the word
it's,
Gobble, I didn't say gobble, gobble, I said gobble. The counselor is an ex-serviceman. He makes that very clear to everybody. He should know what gobble means. It means a transmission that you can't read. It doesn't mean that you're an illiterate because you sent it, or that your race or your manner of speaking.
Oh, you might as well have added that,
or
too,
your
while you're at it.
education isn't worthy. It doesn't mean that at all. It means that it's gobble. We can't understand. We did understand who we wanted it sent to, but we did not know in recognition of what. It's very simple.
and my point,
Well, Thompson, you haven't said anything, but I don't know where I've insulted you.
Well, of course.
Mr. Clerk,
If you'd like to get into the mess here, please be my guest. Sometimes it's good to air these things out in the open.
No, thank you, Mr. Clerk. I appreciate your time.
all right, my point, counselors, is I have no problem holding people accountable. If you're going to raise an issue about an office and how it functions, let the person know before they walk in here at night. Let them approach the appropriate staff member. Let them do the research, gather the information. A little earlier, we just heard about how important it is to have all of the facts and information before us. If you don't do that, then you can't expect the department head to come in
Point of order,
and
Mr.
defend their
President.
actions.
Please read item number 2. What does it say? Tim Cruz and the city clerk. They were supposed to be both on that agenda item. And that's when I addressed it.
I understand.
So he wasn't here.
But the agenda item was about Mr. Cruz. It wasn't about him.
But we were appointing somebody to that position, and the question was about the relationships.
We weren't appointing anyone to city clerk. We were interviewing someone for assistant city clerk. Is there any other further business with the clerk? Councilor Mendez.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
My question for you is, the position for assistant city clerk has been vacant for so long. Is that position in the budget, or are you going to be coming back before us so we can fund that position? Are we all set with the funding for that position? Oh, good. Okay, good, thank you. No further question.
Is there a motion to recommend favorably?
The motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
On the motion, Councilor DeCastro?
You've helped me in so many ways in Ward 4, and I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
There's a motion made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Cardozo.
Yes.
Ianieri.
Yes.
Barwell.
Yes.
Lally.
Yes.
Mendez.
Yes.
Monahan.
Yes.
Nicastro.
Yes.
Rodriguez.
No.
Thompson.
Yes.
8 in the affirmative.
It's recommended favorably. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We look forward to working with you on the ad hoc committee, and
Thank you, councilors, for your time.
Councilors, item number 12 needs to be postponed because the mayor is unable to be here.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to postpone agenda item number 12 to the next Finance Committee meeting.
Second.
All right, motion made and properly seconded to postpone. All in favor? All opposed? It is a vote. Councilor recognitions? Any councilor recognitions? Councilors, it's been a good meeting. I appreciate the give and take, and I thank you for being moderately controlled. If there's no further business, we are adjourned.